This is the Parliament Channel and Parliament Radio 105.5 FM.
We welcome you to the 11th National Youth Parliament, which takes place on Monday, October 28th, 2013.
Three, four. Forth from the love. Forth from the love of liberty. In the Father, hope and prayer. With all that faith in our destiny. For the prayer. Almighty God, creator of the universe and all that is in it, we graciously thank you for your numerous blessings bestowed upon us. As we gather here today, as future leaders of this great land, we look towards you for guidance and wisdom in our deliberations during this 11th sitting of the National Youth Parliament. We ask for wisdom in governance, strength for all our leaders, guidance in our schools, and healing of wounds of separation and division. Open our hearts to accept the truth and demonstrate love always, so that we and all citizens of this nation can live in harmony. Amen.
Announcements by the Speaker. Papers.
Questions to Ministers. Request for leave to move the adjournment of the House on definite matters of urgent public importance. Statements by Ministers. Personal explanations. Introduction of bills. Motions relating to the business or sittings of the House and moved by a Minister or Parliamentary Secretary, public business, private business, motions.
The Honourable Leader of the House.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the honour to lay on the table the following paper, the report of the 10th National Youth Parliamentary Debate 2012.
Leader of the Opposition, Member Paula Huckata.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Whereas Section 22, Subsection 1 of the Children's Act was inserted in 2000 to state that reasonable punishment in relation to a teacher does not include corporal punishment. And whereas there is now an upsurge of reported incidents of violence in our nation's schools. And whereas the government of Trinidad and Tobago ought to recognize the need for the nation's students and teachers to perform their duties in an atmosphere of discipline, safety, and security. And whereas there has been widespread outcry for the reintroduction of corporal punishment in our schools, be it resolved that the government revisit the Children's Act with a view to reintroducing corporal punishment to provide teachers with an additional method to counter violence perpetrated by students. Madam Speaker, before I proceed, allow me to define corporal punishment as given by UNICEF. It is the practice of using physical force to inflict pain but not injury as a means of punishment. Madam Speaker, in the simplest form, Section 22 of the Children's Act of 2000 states that a parent or guardian has the legal right to administer corporal punishment to their child or ward. However, a teacher is denied this right. Madam Speaker, this is a hindrance to teachers and takes away from their ability to effectively teach and administer discipline in our classrooms. Madam Speaker, in the discharge of teaching, teachers themselves depend on several disciplinary methodologies to ensure student compliance and conformity. Corporal punishment allows teachers to exercise discretionary punishments to ensure students behave themselves in the proper manner. This allows a higher level of discipline to be attained and ensures that teaching is more efficient in our classrooms. This is proven, Madam Speaker, by the research of Kerwin and Medler of 1998. These two famous psychologists say that the attainment of discipline is developmental and not obtained overnight. It is an externally imposed activity that results from a fear of being punishment. Madam Speaker, these two celebrated gentlemen clearly demonstrate the instrumental role corporal punishment plays in disciplining our children. Furthermore, Madam Speaker, I'd like to ask you, is it that we remove corporal punishment because we think we don't need it? Or is it a form of cultural imperialism? Do we seek to adopt the models of liberal education proposed by the Americas and other metropoles? Why must we forsake the model of education we ourselves have here in this great republic? Madam Speaker, there has been no local or even regional studies showing the effect of corporal punishment on students. We simply accept studies done by foreign personnel on their societies, and we seek to apply these generalizations to our great nation. How could this ever be logical? There are so many ways in which our society differs from theirs. Madam Speaker, we need methods that will work for us. And I tell you, these methods are not detention, not suspension, and definitely not whimsical projects such as Project Peace. Additionally, I ask you, what is the alternative to corporal punishment? It is the effecting of inefficient, time-wasting methods of discipline. The result of punishment should be increased efficiency, not more time wasting. Think about it. How much time do we waste in our schools behind trivial methods of discipline, such as writing reports, penance, or meeting with parents? Methods such as detention just put further strain on schools with already tight staffing arrangements. Corporal punishment provokes immediate change from students at once, and it allows for the efficiency in the discharge of discipline. Madam Speaker, I spoke with several deans and teachers across the country, and during my chat with them, I was able to gather that on average 2 hours a day, 2 hours, 120 minutes is wasted on disciplinary procedures that ultimately have no impact on students. Madam Speaker, this takes away from contact hours and productivity time in our classrooms. One dean even went as far to tell me, he said that during the days of corporal punishment, all they had to do was walk down the halls with the whip and the entire school would fall silent. They all told me that during the days of corporal punishment, students were far more well-behaved and they had greater respect for administration as well as teaching staff. The deans also went on to say that it was merely the fear of being punished rather than the actual act of being struck itself. And Madam Speaker, I anticipate that there will be detractors to my administration insistent on the fact that teachers will abuse this power and go on to mercilessly hit our children. But it is this erroneous claim that has brought me to my final point. There will be ongoing training to ensure that teachers and administrators are well equipped in administering this punishment. I propose that there be mandatory seminars in which each teacher attends and will be trained in self-control, anger management, and other related matters. This could be done by the UE Psychology Unit to ensure proper principles are taught and teachers are well educated. The Ministry of Education, and the member for Faizabad will reinforce this point, has already trained some 750 teachers across 10 secondary schools in anger and stress management. Obviously, this program will be expanded to ensure all teachers are trained before corporal punishment is implemented. Additionally, Madam Speaker, our children will not be flogged like slaves. This is far beyond the intended parameters of corporal punishment. There is civility in corporal punishment, and each teacher will be made to understand this point. Madam Speaker, I hope I have outlined the vast benefits to be derived from the reintroduction of corporal punishment in our nation's schools. It will certainly cut down on the violent scene and ensure a safer Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you.
In accordance with Standing Order 29-1, the motion requires a seconder.
Madam Speaker, I beg to second the motion and I reserve my right to speak.
Honourable members, I will now propose the question for debate. The question is, whereas Section 22, subsection 2 of the Children Act was inserted in 2000 to state that reasonable punishment in relation to a teacher does not include corporal punishment. And whereas there is now an upsurge of reported incidents of violence in the nation's schools. And whereas the government of Trinidad and Tobago ought to recognize the need for the nation's students and teachers to be able to perform their duties in an atmosphere of discipline, safety, and security. And whereas there has been widespread outcry for the reintroduction of corporal punishment in schools, be it resolved that the government revisit the Children Act with a view to reintroducing corporal punishment to provide teachers with an additional method to counter the violence perpetrated by students. The Honourable Minister of Education, member for Faizabad.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I must say that I am completely appalled at the fact that the opposition is debating this motion. Debating a motion of a practice that was abolished almost 13 years ago. All of this about cultural imperialism is all well and good, Madam Speaker. But, Madam Speaker, to parallel the recent rise in crime and violence and the reintroduction of corporal punishment, Madam Speaker, is like saying, because I stopped hanging my clothes out to dry on the line in the backyard, that is why my automatic dryer stopped working. Madam Speaker, what does one have to do with the other? Now, I would say that there is sufficient evidence to suggest that the rise in crime and violence has been happening even before corporal punishment was abolished. You know why, Madam Speaker? Because we have a saying in this country, whenever the United States sneezes, Trinidad and Tobago does catch cold. It's called technology and globalization, Madam. That is why we have a rise in crime and violence, not because we got rid of corporal punishment. There was a reason we got rid of it, Madam Speaker. If we go back to this barbaric and this old-time way of thinking, it's like a dog going back to their own vomit. Madam Speaker, why would we want this government to behave like a dog going back to their own vomit? Madam Speaker, that is regression, and that is not what this government stands for. It stands for progress. The Honourable Member for La Hocketer stated that There are no local studies or no regional studies that, give proof of corporal punishment here having a negative effect. But on the contrary, I say, Madam Speaker, that there is sufficient studies from the Caribbean Journal of Cultural Studies. Note the word Caribbean in it. Madam Speaker, there is evidence in the literature that true discipline is fellowship with psychologically is the positive approach of nurturing behavior. Richard Kerwin, 1988, for instance, posits that discipline must be inculcated with dignity. That is, taking into account the dignity of the human person. Further evidence in the literature reveals that there is a relationship between corporal punishment and many negative effects such as aggression, aggressive behavior, retaliation, violence, and low self-esteem among pupils. Few studies support the use of corporal punishment to achieve positive discipline in students. Madam Speaker, if that is not enough regional evidence, I don't know what is. I also want to ask, Madam Speaker, did the opposition really take into account the consequences and the negative factors that may be introduced if it is we reintroduce corporal punishment back into the school system? They say, Madam Speaker, that they will train the teachers to administer corporal punishment effectively. But it is a fantasized utopian way of thinking, Madam Speaker, and this is not utopia. This is not an ideal society because we are not ideal persons, and ideal persons do not have ideal behavior. You can train 500 teachers, but the one teacher that steps out of line, what then? Will we sue them? Will we charge them? You can't hit the child. The child is hit. And that is that. So how are we going to deal with that? We also have to take into consideration, Madam Speaker, as I said before,
honorable members, the speaking time of the honorable member for Faizabad has expired.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the speaking time for the honorable member be extended by a further 3 minutes.
Honorable members, the question is that the speaking time of the honorable member for Faizabad be extended by 3 minutes. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Member, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll try to keep my remaining points in brief. Madam Speaker, violence breeds violence. Most high school children will tell you that if you hit them, they'll take their licks and they'll move on with what it is they have to do. What will corporal punishment do for them? And I must stress on the motion at hand, Madam Speaker, because it seems to me that the opposition did not read the motion fully. It says that we want to reintroduce corporal punishment as an additional method to combat the violence, but they are emphasizing it as if it is the only one. And Madam Speaker, what kind of society will we have then? We will be breeding chaos and anarchy where anybody could hit anybody. We need to deal with children with reasoning, understanding, and love, not physical punishment, Madam Speaker. The systems that we have in place, Madam Speaker, they will discredit it from now till kingdom come. But I say, Madam Speaker, that instead of focusing on blanketing the problems with another method, we need to fix the ones that we already have here, because this government is not in the business of blanketing problems. Anything that causes physical or psychological harm is unacceptable, Madam Speaker. And as Minister of Education, I will not allow anything that will harbor any kind of abuse or encourage any kind of misconduct among teachers and students in my schools. So I say, Madam Speaker, that this government is against reintroducing corporal punishment into the school systems. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member for Talparo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can I remind this esteemed chamber of the horrific year of 2000? Now, the reason I call it horrific is simply because here we are, yet again, in 2013, because violence in our schools have driven our children to become murderers.
Am I voicing an opinion? No, Madam Speaker. It is a fact. Let me lay down some facts for you, Madam Speaker. On April 18th of 2012, according to the Newsday, a Pleasantville secondary school, a 14-year-old first former was attacked by two students while simply making his way around the hall. The student had to be hospitalized due to a fractured skull. According to The Guardian, on the 27th of May 2013, at Waterloo High School, a 14-year-old third former was stabbed to death by a 16-year-old fifth former in his back, wrist, and abdomen. Stabbed to death, Madam Speaker. In another incident, on October 1st of 2013, according to the Newsday at Cunupia Secondary School, a schoolboy committed the violent act of stabbing a schoolgirl. A first-form girl brutally stabbed in her left leg and arm by a second-form male. Madam Speaker, all of these things happened after corporal punishment was removed, and if I continue to list out all of the violent acts in our nation's schools after corporal punishment removed, I will be here for the entire day. Now, the government would like us to think that they would have put certain measures and sanctions in place. But here we are in October of 2013 having to deal with murder in our schools. Now, the first sanction that comes into mind is the mentoring project. I was a member of that at one point in time, and might I say that it was something. Inadequate training and no follow-through. It kind of reminds me of our current government. Another sanction that was put into place was expulsion, suspension, and detention. But Madam Speaker, before the year 2000, students did not know what expulsion was. Students of today, however, view suspension as a glorified holiday for deviant behavior. Less school and more time for liming, and they're using the very laptops that the government gave to them to look at pornographic material and use Facebook.
Standing Order 36, Subsection 5, imputing improper motives.
Overruled. Member, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Another grand idea was together we light the way, but clearly the way that is being lit by this light is the way to destruction for our nation's schools. Madam Speaker, even after all of that, we've reached to the point where metal detectors have to be introduced in our school. Metal detectors, Madam Speaker, along with the prominent need for safety officers, guidance counselors, and security guards in each school. Have you ever heard the saying, spare the rod, spoil the child? Because, Madam Speaker, indeed, our children have been spoiled. The government thinks that corporal punishment is barbaric, but the opposition is here to say that the old ways worked. I'm sure His former Excellency, A.N.R. Robinson, would have gotten some good Castara lickings back when he was a child. Or perhaps
Overruled. Member, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Honourable Member for Carolina Central, if you will allow me to finish my point, I would show you the relevance. Madam Speaker.
Honourable members, the speaking time for the Honourable Member for Talparo has expired.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the speaking time for the Honourable Member be extended to a further 3 minutes.
Honourable members, the question is that the speaking time of the Honourable Member for Talparo be extended by 3 minutes. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? Nay. The ayes have it. Member, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was on the point of the great leaders of our nation. Now, I'm sure the Honourable Chief Secretary of the THA over London would have given out some good shots to the Tobago students when he was a principal. Or perhaps His Excellency Mr. Carmona can attest and share stories later today when we're in his presence of a good whooping he would have gotten out of Santa Flora Primary School. And I'm sure that he's thankful for that whooping today because it made him into the disciplined leader of our nation. Madam Speaker, you see, clearly the old ways worked. I don't know how the government can call themselves the leaders of our nation and clearly not see what is laid right in front of them. Perhaps if the government had gotten a good whooping with His Excellency, they might stop opposing the sole sanction that is known to work. The United Nations Development Report for 2010 to 2011 said that 11,000 students were suspended from schools. Madam Speaker, but the problem of violence is still prominent today. The Vice President of the Trinidad and Tobago's Unified Teachers Association stated very clearly in 2012 as an urgent intervention of the government, and this is a direct quote, Madam Speaker, there was a marked increase in violence in schools following the ban of corporal punishment. Madam Speaker, it was stated. It was not alleged, it was not questioned, it was stated with facts and figures, Madam Speaker. The Education Minister of Trinidad and Tobago says that 11,000 students were suspended. But if it is that we don't reintroduce corporal punishment, the situation will continue to perpetuate and raise criminals in our nation's schools. We are not here today because the situation is getting out of control. It is already out of control. Now, the opposition firmly trusts the teachers and their competence and their ability, as Trinidad and Tobago has one of the top schools in nearly every CSEC and CAPE level examination. Thus, don't we need to give them a sanction in place that will allow them to discipline the unruly children and their violent behavior? Madam Speaker, I don't see how the government can call themselves a government and see how implementing this motion is to the betterment of the society, the nation, and in turn the children.
Honourable members, the speaking time for the Honourable Member for Talparo has expired. The Honourable Minister of Land and Marine Resources.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If it were not because of the safety and the future of our nation's youth, I would have taken my seat, having said absolutely nothing like the members from on that side. But lives are at stake. And I want to just remind the members on that side that when they come to this chamber, to take into consideration that your motion is outfitted with legal language that can be challenged by law and not left up to personal interpretation. And therefore, Honourable Speaker, Madam Speaker, I wish to bring to you that the motion really outlines 4 critical issues. The first of which is that the government revisit the Children Act, a universal act of which we are all signatories to, of which we have all vowed our allegiance to safeguard the future of our children, in which it's stated with grammatical profundity that discipline must be in keeping with the dignity of the child. Revisit that act to change it so that that side of the house would embarrass and bring into dispute the intellectual history of this honored house. I'm going into the legal language here. Reintroduce corporal punishment. Madam Speaker, if I were to take my child to a school, I don't know if it will become necessary for me to fill out a form saying that the color of the child's eye is blue and the skin ability to take risks is 2 degrees or 2%. What rule of measure will be used to ensure that that sense of discipline, that primitive, tribal, barbaric kind of discipline does not allow for abuse? Madam Speaker, I want this House to recognize that if we do that, what we are in fact doing is changing the paradigm of this said motion, which said bullying perpetuated by students. It will therefore be an act of bullying perpetuated by teachers and academic staff. I end on, don't hold your breath. Additional methods to counter violence. Madam Speaker, we have sufficient methods. In fact, this government can boast that we have taken initiatives and put measures in place to ensure that by the year 2015 and ultimately by the year 2020, we have sufficiently trained and skillful and artistic teachers outfitting the 21st century classroom who have the sufficient skills and resources and skill sets to deal with problems that pertain to classroom engagement in a civilized and dignified manner. So don't tell me about expulsion and detention and this, that. We now have a program that is mandatory in every institution, every tertiary institution, called classroom management strategies. Madam Speaker, I wish to also say that this house was once called it sounds as if it might serve them well to have computers removed from outfitting the 21st century classroom because the old way worked. It seems to me, Madam Speaker, that we should go back to slavery, where the power to beat and abuse is known as the standard and the natural course of justice because the old way works. It seems to me, Madam Speaker, that the terminology of disciplinary measures.
Honorable members, the speaking time for the honorable member for Barataria San Juan has expired.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the speaking time for the honourable member be extended by a further 3 minutes.
Honourable members, the question is that the speaking time of the honourable member for Barataria San Juan be extended by 3 minutes. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Member, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I will hasten to my point because time perhaps isn't serving me well. But according to the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, it says that whereas the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and I will hasten to my point, recognize the dignity of the human person and the equal and inalienable rights with which all members of the human family is endowed by their Creator. If we were to allow this motion to pass today, ma'am, we not only will be in violation of the law, but we will be taking into siege the future of this great republic. To me, Madam Speaker, that sounds like an intellectual coup trying to take over this house. Madam Speaker, I wish also to bring your attention to, in 2000, when this was abolished, there was a statement on human rights and equal opportunities which says that discipline must be in keeping with the dignity of the human person. Madam Speaker, if we only allow ourselves to embrace such emotion, then not only will our children not have a beautiful Trinidad and Tobago to inherit, but we will have as a legacy something which we cannot be proud of. And this government is not for that. Thank you, Madam.
Member for Kumuto Manzanella.
Madam Speaker, corporal punishment is an official punishment for the misbehavior by school children, but punishment for misbehavior by school children involving striking, whipping, and caning these children in a generally methodological and premeditated ceremony. It usually administered across the buttocks or on the hands. Madam Speaker, corporal punishment serves as a deterrent.
36, the members reading from script.
Honourable members, I may remind you all not to read from your speech. Honourable member, you may continue.
Save the child's future. Corporal punishment is not abuse. Corporal punishment increases productivity and efficiency in an economy. Corporal punishment is also supported by the Bible. Madam Speaker, it instills an incentive to other students that their bad actions and misbehavior can be solved through corporal punishment. The fear of being whipped or canned, Madam Speaker, this disciplinary method is to instill respect and discipline among these students, Madam Speaker.
Will the member be willing to give way?
Yes, you may.
Is the honourable member encouraging the use of fear being instilled into the fragile and malleable mind of a child?
The honourable member of Faizabad, this fear is to instill discipline and respect in these students. To teach these students there are consequences for their actions. Madam Speaker, when a nation develops through respectable citizens, it also contributes to a greater and efficient economy. Madam Speaker, if these children are being properly trained from schools, attaining respect and discipline, they go into the workplace carrying on the same level of attitude and order. Now, Speaker, I know I'm speaking about corporal punishment in schools, but it directly relates back to whipping any bad habits in the early childhood of a child life. It's acceptable as it saves them from the same mistakes and unforgiving, cruel adult world. It's also quoted in the Bible that foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child, and the road of correction will drive it far from him. Madam Speaker, I would like to conclude by saying we cannot bend an old tree, but we can mold a young plant. Thank you.
The Honorable Minister of Tobago Development.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, for us to understand the negative implications of reintroducing corporal punishment, we must understand the mind of the child. Corporal punishment creates embarrassment, which in turn creates resentment towards the teacher and towards authority. This resentment will manifest itself into violent and aggressive behavior, which is the same problem that the opposition claims the reintroduction of corporal punishment will fix. Madam Speaker, teachers are humans, like you and I, with human emotions and human problems. If they are given the authority to corporally punish students, they will use this as an opportunity to vent their frustrations and their anger on the unsuspecting students. And I draw reference to a case in the Sevilla Private Primary School.
Will the Honourable Member give way?
I am sorry, my time is fast spent, and I must most regrettably say no. Madam Speaker, and I must draw reference to a case in the Sevilla Private Primary School where a teacher grabbed a student by the back of his hair and slammed his head against the desk. How do I know, Madam Speaker? Because I was there. Madam Speaker, we can obviously see that we cannot trust teachers to know how much is too much. Madam Speaker, reintroducing corporal punishment is like taking the leaves off of a dangerous weed but not uprooting it. Corporal punishment is not the sickness. It is a symptom. A symptom of the deep-rooted ills that face our school population, such as peer pressure, broken homes, and violence in the homes. We must seek to address these deep-rooted problems and not simply put a plaster over it. Madam Speaker, anybody who supports the reintroduction of corporal punishment runs the risk of exposing their laziness in dealing with these deep-rooted social problems that face our young people. Madam Speaker, the members on the opposite side talk about training teachers. Training teachers, many of whom are old and set in their ways. Madam Speaker, you cannot teach an old dog, new tricks. Madam Speaker, the member on the floor.
Is the member willing to give way?
Sure.
I ask you as a member of the government, what are you doing to combat these social ills?
What are we doing to combat the social ills? We have set up other methods of dealing with school discipline, such as suspension and expulsion, as well as setting up suspension centers where students can go, and homework centers where students can go after school and take them away from the negative environment so that they can be mentored and deal with the specific problems that they may be facing. Madam Speaker, the member on the opposite side sought to use the Bible in order to back up his argument. Madam Speaker, in a multicultural, multi-ethnic, and multi-religious society such as ours, how could you possibly want to use the Bible? Madam Speaker, we must understand that corporal punishment was removed for a reason. It was seen as a retrograde and barbaric way of dealing with violence and bullying in our schools. And as we propel our country into a bright future, let us look for new and innovative ways of dealing with our problems, not go back to the old and outdated. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Point of Peer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and good morning to you and all members in this House. Madam Speaker, the Minister of Education and the Honourable Member for Faizabad, the member mentioned that we have a crime problem in this country, Madam Speaker. She even mentioned that. And they want to say no against reintroducing corporal punishment in schools. Okay, Madam Speaker. And the Honourable Member for Barataria San Juan, he used the words beat and abuse. Really, Madam Speaker? Beat and abuse? Then, if that is how they describe corporal punishment, Madam Speaker, it's obvious they don't even know what corporal punishment is. Madam Speaker, when we put the motion forward to reinstate corporal punishment, we are not going in schools to beat students till they bleed, Madam Speaker. It's a form of discipline, Madam Speaker. And the Honourable Member for Orupuch West, he mentioned when asked by my colleague from La Hokita, when asked what methods are they putting in place, he said suspension, expulsion, homework centers. I want to remind the member for Orupuch West, those methods are already in play, and I have news for you, it doesn't work. Madam Speaker, since the abolishment of corporal punishment by this government in the year 2000, we have seen a noticeable increase in crime, in school violence, in bullying, and all of these stems from the school because teachers don't have the authority to discipline students anymore, Madam Speaker. So what do you expect is going to happen? Madam Speaker, we have a crime situation so terrible that it is a rare sight now to actually see a Form 1 student enter any given secondary school and actually complete his education up to Cape without being stabbed, bullied, threatened, or go through some sort of mental suffering or physical suffering. Because that is the situation our schools are in today, Madam Speaker. Students are safe.
Will the member be willing to give way?
Yes.
You say mental and physical suffering, Mr. Member for Point of Peer. But need I remind you that corporal punishment does have the capability of turning into physical and mental suffering.
Corporal punishment, I will say again, Honourable Member for Faizabad, it is not to instill fear, or it's not to instill scarring, mental scarring, or physical scarring as a matter of fact. And I'll bring some facts later on, Member. Madam Speaker, please allow me to make my reference point using some newspaper articles, because the crime situation is so terrible right now that our schools, they actually breed these criminals in the sense of without disciplining students in a proper manner, Madam Speaker, those students then leave school and they go about thinking they could perform crimes, they could hold up people, they could beat students in schools and out of schools, Madam Speaker. Take for example, please allow me to quote from the Newsday, Tuesday, October 8th, 2013. Stop the bullying in schools. And I quote, "There have been many incidents of school violence in this country, and it is time for the police service to get involved and reach out to students," said Acting Commissioner of Police Stephen Williams. The police has to be involved now, Madam Speaker. Another article, Madam Speaker. Friday, April 20th.
Honourable members, the speaking time of the Honourable Member for Point of Peer has expired.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the speaking time for the Honourable Member of Point 14 be extended to a further, Point of Peer be extended to a further 2 minutes.
Honourable members, the question is that the speaking time of the Honourable Member for Point of Peer be extended by 3 minutes. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it, member. You may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, colleagues. As I was saying, Madam Speaker, Friday, April 20th, 2012, schoolboy beaten up. Newsday. A 14-year-old student of Pleasantville Secondary School had to be warded at San Fernando General Hospital after he was beaten by two other schoolboys on Wednesday evening while awaiting transportation outside the school's compound, Madam Speaker. And take this story, school violence prevalence, Saturday, June 11th, 2011. Education Minister yesterday admitted that violence among children at the nation's schools is prevalent, and the recent incident in which one female student of the Baratarian North Secondary School mercilessly beat another female student in a drain as disturbing, Madam Speaker. All these stories, ridiculous. We have a method to deal with these students. And Madam Speaker, this one interests me. $2 million has been donated to the Citizens Security Program by the Inter-American Development Bank to deal with the nation's school violence problem. And this was in when, Madam Speaker, Wednesday, February 9th, 2011. $2 million has been donated to the Citizens Security Program to help combat violence, help create a new routine for a new road for it. And where does that lead us? Look, we're in 2013, Madam Speaker, and so much violence. Now students are dying in schools. Madam Speaker, we have a serious, serious crime problem. And this problem could be easily solved. We need to reinstate corporal punishment, Madam Speaker. I would simply conclude by stating we are losing our nation's youth to the plague of violence, Madam Speaker. We are losing our teachers to indisciplined students, Madam Speaker. Ask yourself, Madam Speaker, how many more newspaper articles would you like to read involving with youths in crime and school violence, Madam Speaker, students losing their lives? Let's put an end to school violence. Support the move to reinstate corporal punishment. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of National Security.
Madam Speaker, I have a dream. I have a dream that one day the members of the opposition will wake up from their dream and face the realities that are facing our nation's students and teachers in our schools. Madam Speaker, I urge the opposition to come down from their Mount Olympus and reason with us mere mortals as to the inadmissible rationale for this proposed motion. Because it is this government and by extension the people of Trinidad and Tobago's stance that we do not want to counter the violence that is taking place in our nation's schools, but we want and will have it eradicated, Madam Speaker. You see, Madam Speaker, I am not here to sue you with ostentatious vernacular, because we all here are well-learned individuals, well, for the majority at least. But I am here to inform my colleagues of the misconceptions as it relates to the violence in our nation's schools. And certainly, I can attest to the fact that the reintroduction of corporal punishment will not, and I repeat, will not combat the violence taking place in our nation's schools. Rather, if this motion is passed, there will be a subsequent upsurge of violence in our nation's schools. Now, I know this may seem, a bit far-fetched, but allow me to simplify this as much as possible for the opposition's sake. I think it is safe to say that we need a certain level of discipline in our nation's schools. But where the disparity lies is the extent of what type of discipline do we instill in our nation's schools. The problem, Madam Speaker, emanates from the fact that if we reintroduce corporal punishment in our nation's schools, this will do more harm than good, Madam Speaker, and the government is assured that this is a fact. I am baffled, genuinely, truly baffled, to the process of reasoning and logic that the opposition has in putting forth this motion today, Madam Speaker. This will not be the reintroduction of corporal punishment, as for our current generation, corporal punishment has never been the case. So the shock value of this paradigm shift will cause an upsurge in crime in our country. Madam Speaker, imagine in our school today, violence ensues when a student is verbally addressed or verbally disciplined. Can you imagine the upcries in violence towards teachers if a student is hit or chastised in any way? Madam Speaker, I'm not saying that we should be fearful of students or students should not be disciplined in any way, but corporal punishment is definitely not the answer. Madam Speaker, let's say hypothetically speaking that it was a bad idea to remove corporal punishment. What if that really and truly this was true, it was a bad idea to remove corporal punishment from our nation's schools? The problem is that in this current environment that we engage in, a reintroduction of corporal punishment would not be substantial to fix the violence within our nation's schools, Madam Speaker. I can only describe this motion as brilliant. Brilliant, Madam Speaker. A brilliant impersonation of the misinformed, a brilliant impersonation of ignorance, and a brilliant impersonation of what not to do.
Member is imputing improper motion. Is using offensive language, I suppose.
Honorable members, I remind you all not to use offensive language in the chamber. Honorable member, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I must apologize.
Honorable members, the speaking time of the honorable member for Tabaquis has expired.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the speaking time for the honorable member be extended by a further 3 minutes.
Honorable members, the question is that the speaking time of the honorable member for Tabaquis be extended by 3 minutes. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Member, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, honestly, I sympathize with the opposition because I do see the need for a radical change in our school system. I do see the need for something to be implemented that would bring about this change that we are all looking for. But I must apologize to the opposition, Madam Speaker, because corporal punishment is definitely not the answer. Therefore, Madam Speaker, it is my duty as National Minister of National Security to ensure the safety of this country, to ensure the safety of every constituency, every teacher, and I can pledge that I will ensure the safety of our nation's children from the opposition that is trying to take away their effective and moral rights to be creative and expressive within the classroom. Lastly, Madam Speaker, corporal punishment, or this notion that children must be beaten or forced into good behavior or not being violent, this notion, Madam Speaker, is irrelevant. Why, Madam Speaker? Because by a firm and guiding hand, the nation's children can be led out of the violence that is taking place today in our society. Not corporal punishment. By this firm and gentle hand, they will be straightened out and able to stand firm on their own, Madam Speaker. And if we introduce corporal punishment, we will fall into shambles, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much.
Member for Tableland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Now, I am flabbergasted by what the government is bringing to this debate today. It's apparent to me that their ears are not working, or they just simply do not understand what corporal punishment is. And I will distinctly repeat what it is. Corporal punishment is a form of punishment that inflicts pain on a child, i.e. a lash, as a form of a retribution for a wrong action or to curb their discipline, Speaker. And that is linking actions to consequences. Now, Madam Speaker, our member for Faizabad and Barataria talks about violence with violence. And Madam Speaker, they do not understand that corporal punishment is not violence. Violence is the definition of violence is the deliberate and intentional use of physical power to a person that may cause injury or death. And Madam Speaker, nowhere in the definition of corporal punishment did we talk about injury and death, Madam Speaker. That is not what we are doing here. Now, Madam Speaker, since you're on the topic of violence, I would like to bring in bullying into this because bullying is a form of violence, Madam Speaker. Now, bullying is the deliberate and persistent action that causes mental instability and physical injury on a child. Now, Madam Speaker, I would like to propose to you a question. I am sure you would want your child to go to school in a safe environment. Now, if your child is going to school and is being bullied, Madam Speaker, every single day of her life, Madam Speaker, do you think that the best way of punishment for that child is detention or suspension or having to sit down in lectures for several hours listening to the programs that the government has implemented in the school, Madam Speaker? No, Madam Speaker, you want justification for your innocent child. Madam Speaker, these programs and solutions that the government has implemented, Madam Speaker, have not been working. It has not been scaring off these bullies, Madam Speaker, and it has not deterred their actions yet, Madam Speaker. What will deter their actions, Madam Speaker, is having a high level of power in the school that will show that they have control over the
member
bullies.
Be willing to give way?
No, no member. Pass about and press for time. Thank you. I'm sorry. Now, yes, Madam Speaker, high level of control, Madam Speaker, to show who is boss in the school, Madam Speaker, and that is the teachers, Madam Speaker, not the bullies over your child, Madam Speaker, the teachers over the bullies. Madam Speaker, so we now can see that corporal punishment is an effective way in combating bullying and, by extension, the violence in the schools today. Now, Madam Speaker, I know some of my members have already talked about this, but I would like to bring it back up, Madam Speaker, and I quote from the news there, Madam Speaker, of the 14-year-old child of Pleasantville who was beaten and bullied by two boys from his school, Madam Speaker, and suffered a fractured skull. Now, it went on to say that in light of this latest act of bullying, First Vice President of the tutor, Devanand Sinanan, is calling for the urgent intervention of government in dealing with the issue of bullying in the nation's schools. There was a marked increase in violence in schools following the ban of corporal punishment, Sinanan noted. He lamented that nothing was put in place since the removal of the form of corporal punishment, and students were taking advantage of the situation. Now, to Mr. Sinanan, I say to you, bring back the corporal punishment in the school. It is an effective way. Now, the school is responsible for the child just as the parent is responsible for the child, Madam Speaker. You cannot say that a teacher in school cannot administer a lash to a child to curb their discipline just as a parent at home would administer a lash to their own child to curb the discipline in the homes, Madam Speaker. These teachers should be able to do just the same thing, Madam Speaker, because they are responsible for the child in the school. Now, Madam Speaker, the article of the Newsday was printed just April 20th, 2012, Madam Speaker, and that was just last year, Madam Speaker. And that is proven, Madam Speaker, that everything the government has implemented since the banning of corporal punishment 13 years ago in the year 2000 has not been working, Madam Speaker. Even tutor is crying out, Madam Speaker. Minister of Education, tutor is crying out. What do we want to wait until a child is dead, Madam Speaker?
Honorable members, the speaking time of the honorable member for Tableland has expired.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the speaking time for the honorable member for Tableland be extended by 3 minutes.
Honorable members, the question is that the speaking time of the honorable member for Tableland be extended by 3 minutes. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? I think the ayes have it. Honorable member, you may continue.
Speaker, So as I was saying, Madam Speaker, are we going to wait until a child is dead? But this has already happened to Madam Speaker. Do you want your child to die? I think not, Madam Speaker. So therefore, I think that corporal punishment is the most effective additional solution that can be implemented into the nation's schools to curb the indiscipline and the violence. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First of all, I don't know if it's just me, but the opposition seems to quite love newspaper articles, Madam Speaker. But my question to them, would you believe everything out of a newspaper article? The cinema guide in a newspaper article is wrong nearly 95% of the time. So could you please go directly to all those cases you have been speaking to and bring a quote? Thank you. Madam Speaker, first of all, corporal punishment is like an experiment. And an experiment needs a trial. It was given a trial, and in this same chamber, we had all gathered and decided that it would be banned, Madam Speaker. So my question is, why reintroduce, as my fellow member Faisabad said, why reintroduce something that was banned 13 years ago? Is that not going way back? Is that not going to the old ways, which the member of Taparo seems to love, which I disagree with? Madam Speaker, if we were to go back to the old ways too, then shall I turn off this mic and attach a can with a string towards you and myself? Might I ask that? Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, another observation of the opposition, they have been quite observant, is that they have been given numerous amounts. Crimes has risen after 2000. To compare something from then on now, you need statistics and facts from then, and they have brought nothing before when corporal punishment was there. They have only brought it after corporal punishment was banned. I think they are very confused of what they are debating. Madam Speaker, I'd like to bring your attention to everyone present here who already knows this, that the watchwords of the country is discipline, tolerance, and production. Nowhere have I ever seen in any place discipline brackets beat them real bad, tolerance and production. You cannot expect to beat somebody to get discipline. They will just be even more indisciplined.
Will the honourable member give way?
Honourable member, no, I'm pressed for time, and you also need to stand when you are asking to give way. Madam Speaker, I would like to go to, if you hit a child, they would not want to come back to school. They barely want to go to school as you speak. If you hit a child, they would not want to go back to school, Madam Speaker. And if the child is not in school, they might not even tell their parents. Where would they go? I am assuming they would go to the drug blocks. I am assuming they would line around where all those club people are. And I am assuming they would be the next drug pushers. So the answer is, Madam Speaker, that it is not, if corporal punishment is not reintroduced, that there will be more criminals and more...
Is the member willing to give way?
No, member, I am not willing to give way. You can ask. Right. The answer is, Madam Speaker, that it is not, if corporal punishment is not reintroduced, that there will be more drug pushers and murderers, but it's if corporal punishment is reintroduced, that there will be more drug pushers and more persons just dilly-dallying around Trinidad and Tobago. And if that is the kind of society that the opposition wants, I pity them. Madam Speaker, I have a quote from a parent of a child going to El Dorado West, whose name would rather be confidential, stating, "My daughter had been buffed harshly by a teacher for not bringing a textbook and then severely taunted by peers in school and social websites, leading her to inflict pain upon herself." Madam Speaker, this speaks for itself. If a child is merely buffed, and that is actually speaking to them in an aggressive manner, and that child, he or she, leads to inflict pain upon her or himself, What will happen if a teacher has the audacity now to come, and not just the audacity, they have the right, because the opposition wants to bring it back legal, to beat that child in front of a class. I could imagine the tones on Facebook. I could imagine the laughter, and I could imagine what that child would want to do. I am thinking suicide, and if that is what the opposition wants, a higher rate in suicide, I pity you again. Madam Speaker, another quote, because I'm fascinated by quotes, is that a child from Queensborough College, again, nobody names
members. The speaking time of the honourable member for Arima has expired.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the speaking time for the honourable member be extended by a further 3 minutes.
Honourable members, the question is that the speaking time of the honourable member for Arima be extended by a further 3 minutes. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? I think the ayes have it. Member, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I see I'm pressed for time. Madam Speaker, as I was saying, my quote from a student from Queensborough College stated, I obtained 96% in my math exam, and my teacher gave me 1,000 lines to be written as such, and I quote, I can do better with more studying. Madam Speaker, we are talking about 96% here. If a teacher has the audacity to give a child lines to get in over 90%, imagine what he would do or she would do if he were allowed a chance to hit that child. Madam Speaker, since the opposition has brought no definition of bullying or violence from a regional or Caribbean, might I add, website, I would like to do so. Bullying, as defined by the Ministry of Youth and Gender Youth Affairs, as any mean word, look, sign, or act that hurts a person's body, feelings, or things. Violence is defined as doing harm to another, whether physical or mental. Under this definition, bullying would be considered a form of violence to induce fear. Madam Speaker, it seems like the opposition are bullies. They want to induce fear in a child in order to get what they want. I disagree. The government of Trinidad and Tobago disagrees with this, and we shall not stand for it, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in closing, I would just like to say, well, I heard a member of La Hokata, which quite amused me, say it, and I quote, parents and guardians are given the right to administer corporal punishment. Why are teachers not given this right? This is most amusing because I know there are two hands to clap and making a child, and I do not believe a teacher is one of them. Why does the opposition think that they can hit this child? I am most bewildered by that. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Laventille East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I am highly disappointed in the flimsy and inconsistent arguments put forward by the government. As the chief whip of the opposition, I stand by this motion. This is not a fly-by-night motion, right? It was carefully thought out because the notion of corporal punishment is a topical global issue. Now, Madam Speaker, I invite the government to take a microscopic look at the disparities in our generation. On the one hand, there's the older generation that is respectful. And on the other hand, there's the child of today that is carefree, reckless, and disrespectful of those in authority. And Madam Speaker, I'm going to tell you why. The MP for Arima and I actually have something in common because I have quotes too and I like them. An extract from an interview with a student who would also like to be confidential. We like to sit down in the back of class and make jokes and laugh loud. We love it when Miss gets vexed with we. We really don't care because she can't do nothing. That is the problem at hand, Madam Speaker. She can't do nothing. Hence, it is explicit that the reintroduction of corporal punishment in schools would serve as a deterrent to eradicate disruption, destruction, delinquencies, and the decrease in graduate nation schools?
Remember, be willing to give way.
No, thank you. Press for time. Madam Speaker, corporal punishment is not violence. Corporal punishment is not abuse. Do not twist our words. It is a tool of discipline that has its time, it has its place, and it has a record of working in the past. Now, with the reintroduction of corporal punishment, the incumbents are obviated from engaging in bad behavior. Now, this change in behavior, it begins with the instinctual connection with bad behavior and pain, cause and effect. This will foster an avoidance through logical reasoning. Now, Madam Speaker, it appears that the government is insinuating that we are so tribal, as the MP for Barataria, someone just loves to use, that we are so tribal in our mentality, and that we would not surpass a limited capacity and mature and grow and realize and reason that there is a correlation between restraint of misdemeanor and corporal punishment. Now, some of the members from the government had the audacity to stand and make reference to the United Nations. The United Nations, just like any of the other international organizations, it is solely run by developed countries. For example, the UN, P5, and this is relevant, P5, China, UK, US, Russia, France. They are developed. Trinidad and Tobago, developing. What works for them might not work for us. We have, Madam Speaker, we have a different history, different literature, different geography, different norms, different culture. As I said, what works for them did not work for us. 13 years has shown this. Madam Speaker, why this government likes to play copycat? It is beyond me. Madam Speaker, as leaders, we have the responsibility to protect the sovereignty of the citizens. And if, as leaders, we cannot do that, then God be upon us. I rest my case.
The Honourable Minister of Housing and Urban Development.
Madam Speaker, it seems to me that there must be some rift or some sort of deficiency in the language and speaking pathology of the opposition. Because I still cannot come to terms. I still cannot understand why the members for La Hoqueta
Overrule, member, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, as I was saying, Madam Speaker, I cannot come to terms to understand why the member for La Hoqueta and Tableland would think that it is the right of a teacher to corporally punish a child. Madam Speaker, according to the United Nations again, after their last report from the Conventions of the Rights of a Child, and I quote, "It is the sacred right of parents," I repeat, it is the sacred right of parents to punish their child, and corporal punishment may be used if they see it fit to do so. Madam Speaker, all of this talk from the opposition about, what is corporal punishment and definitions of bullying, but nobody has paid specific attention to what is the rights and the rules
Madam
and
Speaker,
responsibilities.
point of order, 33-6. The member is reading from a speech in her hand there.
Remember, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Apparently, everyone in the opposition is thinking that I'm reading from script. That is not reading from script, honourable members. As I was continuing, the United Nations went on to state in that same said document, and I quote again, The rights of a teacher is to simply teach or educate a student and foster learning in the classroom or any environment that is conducive to learning. And by no means, Madam Speaker, was corporal punishment mentioned in that description. Madam Speaker, as I said before, the member for La Hocketa mentioned that it is the right of a teacher to corporally punish a child. I don't know where he got his information from, but I want to ask a question. Has the opposition even examined the repercussions of such actions by teachers? Have they really?
Willing to give way?
Madam Speaker, I'm on my feet. Honorable Member, you had your time. I have my time as well. As I was saying, Madam Speaker, has the opposition been able to examine these repercussions and the actions by teachers if corporal punishment were to be reintroduced into the system? If a teacher corporally punishes a child by inflicting physical harm to that child, it causes more than physical pain, Madam Speaker. It also causes emotional and psychological harm to that child. Madam Speaker, psychological and emotional harm. I'm sure no amount of apology would be able.
Standing order 43-1, tedious repetition.
Honorable members, the continuous point of order is interrupting the member from continuing her speech. I ask to refrain from the excessive point of orders, please.
Yes, Madam Speaker, as I was continuing to say, the fact that corporal punishment would not only cause psychological and emotional harm to a child, Madam Speaker, no amount of apologies can rid the ridicule and the embarrassment that a child will face after being corporally punished in front of a class of students, in front of their friends, Madam Speaker. No amount.
Honorable members, the speaking time for the honorable member for Laventille West has expired.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to move that the speaking time of the honorable member be extended by a further 3 minutes.
Honorable members, the question is that the speaking time for the honorable member for Laventille West be extended by 3 minutes. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? Nay. I think the ayes have it. Honorable member, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As you see, we are all pressed for time here by the points of orders that have been drawn before. But I will continue to say that as far as I'm concerned, everyone here is human. I am human. You are human. Everyone in this honorable house is human. And by right, I believe that we have something called human rights. And allow me to quote, human rights are the rights of both adults and children existing in developed and developing nations, which are supposed to prevent us from being free from all forms of abuse, Madam Speaker. And that includes corporal punishment, Madam Speaker. It includes corporal punishment being administered onto children because it is a direct violation of the rights, the universal rights of a child, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I would go on to say that if the opposition is proposing the reintroduction of corporal punishment into the school system, we are by no means going to move from developing status, as the Laventille East member mentioned. We will remain at developing status and will never reach developing status. And Madam Speaker, to be really honest with you, if it is that we cannot move from developing status to a developed status, then we have failed as a people, we have failed as a nation, and we have failed as a government and opposition and the future leaders of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, I would like to urge the opposition to think about these repercussions seriously, the real repercussions that would be added to the reintroduction of corporal punishment, because they seem to be reiterating that dream with this motion that is completely baseless and it holds no ground. Madam Speaker, and as I add again, if the opposition and the government cannot see eye to eye, then may God really help us. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for St. Joseph.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I cannot seem to understand the most profound and yet flagellating statements made by the members of the government. Madam Speaker, on the contrary to what the Honourable Member for Barataria said, they were elected into this Honourable House back in the date 2010. However, Madam Speaker, it must be noted that it is so imperative to this debate, Madam Speaker, that recently in the last two elections, Madam Speaker, was the government successful? Madam Speaker, it is a saying that the voice of the people is the voice of God. And Madam Speaker, as quite a few members on the government seem to suggest that God help us, Madam Speaker, then God really has to help us. Madam Speaker, the member for Faizabad wanted to find out what do the members of the opposition have in place if a teacher violates this use of corporal punishment. Madam Speaker, according to the Children's Act, Section 3, Subsection 1, convictions are in place, Madam Speaker. There are fines of $10,000, $5,000, Madam Speaker. I cannot seem to understand where's the logic here, Madam Speaker. Clearly, there's a problem with the government's sense of thinking, rationalizing, and understanding the statements made by this worthy opposition. Madam Speaker, I would leave all of those things for another day. Madam Speaker, I would like to focus on the psychological effects of corporal punishment. Madam Speaker, according to the Oxford Dictionary, an effect is, and I quote, a change which is the constant or consequence of an action. And psychology is the scientific study of the human mind and its functions, especially those affecting behavior in a given context. Madam Speaker, then it can be notifiable to mention that a psychological effect is that change which is a result or consequence of corporal punishment on the scientific study of the human body, its functions, and the behavioral patterns of human beings. Madam Speaker, I do acknowledge the fact that there are numerous studies worldwide to prove that some degree of fear caused by corporal punishment has resulted in the anxiety levels of students in schools to be aggravated. However, Madam Speaker, that is not in context with what the members of this opposition is proposing. Madam Speaker, when we say corporal punishment, we are inflicting pain, but not injury, Madam Speaker. And these things only occur, Madam Speaker, if injury is inflicted. Madam Speaker, I would like to refer to Pavlov's theory of classical conditioning. And in this theory, Madam Speaker, Pavlov said that classical conditioning is a form of learning in which the conditioned stimulus occurs another learnt stimulus in the unconditioned one. Madam Speaker, I would further explain what I'm saying here. A condition, when you refer to conditioning, Madam Speaker, it's the relationship between two stimuli. And the stimulus is that which causes a response in an organism. Madam Speaker, Pavlov used the analogy of a dog. And I know members of the government will ask, why compare us esteemed human beings to that of a dog? However, Madam Speaker, the Pavlov theory is applicable to all living things. And so is a dog, he's a living thing or she's a living thing, and so are we as human beings. Madam Speaker, Pavlov said that dogs, when they hear the sound of a bell.
Honorable members, the speaking time for the honorable member for St. Joseph has expired.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the speaking time for the honorable member of St. Joseph be extended by 3 minutes.
Honorable members, the question is that the speaking time of the Honorable Member for St. Joseph be extended by 3 minutes. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? Aye. I think the ayes have it. Honorable Member, you may continue.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the same logic in when you ring a bell for a dog to come and get his food. It is the same principle that we can apply to corporal punishment. The conditioned stimulus here, Madam Speaker, is that mechanism of corporal punishment. And the unconditioned stimulus, Madam Speaker, is that discipline that follows. Madam Speaker, we talk about fear being instilled, but Madam Speaker, if you really think about it, if there isn't that level of fear between a student and a teacher, Madam Speaker, how is that student going to respect his or her tutor? Madam Speaker, the teacher is the one who is reliable and responsible for teaching that student the values of the norms to which society conforms. That whole idea of value consensus, Madam Speaker. And if there's no mutual respect there, Madam Speaker, how then can this nation move forward from this whole issue of violence in schools? Madam Speaker, I would like to refer to an article, rather a report on a national survey conducted on July 2009 on the region of Barbados. Madam Speaker, before I go any forward, I would like to justify my reason for using Barbados in this debate. Madam Speaker, not only are we both, Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados, sitting in this beautiful Caribbean Sea. However, Madam Speaker, both of us are geographically, historically, politically, and diasporically linked to this Caribbean region. Madam Speaker, in this debate, of all the persons who were interviewed, 54% of them, Madam Speaker, wanted corporal punishment. The honorable members of the government wanted evidence. There you have evidence, Madam Speaker. People want this corporal punishment in schools. Madam Speaker, on the contrary, when students were asked for their views of this corporal punishment, 76% of them said they don't want corporal punishment. But Madam Speaker, think of it logically. If your child tells you, Mommy, I really like to watch television, but Madam Speaker, she does something wrong, would you not ban her from watching television, the one thing that she likes, Madam Speaker? It is the same logic that we can apply here. Madam Speaker.
Members, the speaking time of the Honorable Member for St. Joseph has expired. The Honorable Prime Minister.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the opposition wishes to reintroduce corporal punishment into schools after much debate has been conducted on this topic. They are prompting this government to use an old solution to remedy a modern problem. Therefore, Madam Speaker, if I were to help remedy the degradation of the ozone layer, I should have come to Parliament on a bulka or ride a bike to Parliament in my freshly pressed suit. I think not. So far, they have presented a moderate debate and actually shows that they are thinking. And that is what we, on this side of the government, love. To see that they are thinking. But unlike the opposition, Madam Speaker, we, the government, think for the people, think about our people of the Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, so far, the opposition has presented issues on crime and corporal punishment to help discipline. Now, I will read an extract by Hoyt, a man named Hoyt in 1985, that deals with discipline before it arises. He developed the idea of addressing indiscipline through a range of activities. Teachers, for example, through their various ranges experiences with the classroom and children, present lessons that validate these children and help grow their self-esteem instead of bashing or reacting as they often do to these children in a negative way. Also, Madam Speaker, the government as well as the society and schools wish to help satisfy the needs and wants of children, therefore preempting indiscipline before it arises.
Is the member willing to give way?
Sure.
Mr.
Prime Minister, I'm curious, who is this man named Hoyt? What credence does he have?
He's a psychologist of the clinical psychiatric ward in the Philippines. Also, Madam Speaker, just to shed a little light on the subject at hand with Mr. Hoyt. At the Swaha School in Trinidad and Tobago, meditation is an integral part in the assembly. This would help children focus and concentrate on task ahead and help them apply their energies into a positive activity. The school now has lower reported cases of violence throughout. Secondly, parent-teachers seminars, whereby knowledge and guidance is shared to parents as well as teachers in how to apply and approach discipline towards a child. Thirdly, actions to increase the knowledge of a child by the principal and teachers. If a principal or teacher of a classroom knows the background, the academic advantages, or the hidden talent of a child, they can mold that child in something that will be good, instead of applying corporal punishment when the child misbehaves. Another precaution that the government has taken is to abolish extracurricular activities and implement and engineer the curriculum to support co-curricular activities, whereby children across the school of Trinidad and Tobago, it is compulsory for them to be in an activity that does not relate directly to academics. This will allow the children to vent their energies into a positive activity rather than being indisciplined in the classroom. Also, these activities will help to uncover hidden talents that the child may possess. Example, chess club, sports club, even the debate club. All these can help children make a better tomorrow for this country, Madam Speaker. Also, teachers in this regard play a role modeling function in the school. As you know, children are away from home 6 to 8 hours per day. Therefore, the school will become their home for the day, and teachers will be like parents. Therefore,
honorable members, the speaking time of the honorable member for Couva North has expired.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the speaking time for the honorable member be extended by a further 3 minutes.
Honorable members, the question is that the speaking time of the honorable member for Couva South North be extended by a further 3 minutes. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Member, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members of the House. Yes, as I was saying, Madam Speaker, teachers, the role that teachers embody reflects on how a citizen is supposed to behave in Trinidad and Tobago. Therefore, the reintroduction of corporal punishment contradicts notions such as respect for all and solving conflicts with non-violent methods. Also, Madam Speaker, I'd like to draw reference to the psychiatrist, Violetta Boster, of the psychiatric ward in Miami, where she explains 8 different ways in which corporal punishment can have a psychological long-term effect on children in schools. 1 is weakness. It weakens the trust and bonds between parents and their children. 2, creates fear in a child. And may I say, Madam Speaker, respect is something that is not to be demanded, but something that has to be earned. Engenders feelings of confusion, resentment, and anger within the child. Lower the child's self-esteem, and so on, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as you know, our region was once a global capitalist a global capitalist agenda as witnessed by the Enslavement Act a couple of years ago. The brutality of enslavement was maintained through a range of practices which instilled fear and repression in the slaves, Madam Speaker. We also know that such repression resulted in an explosive all out war in the Caribbean region. Therefore, Madam Speaker, in Haiti. So I ask the members of the opposition do they wish to see a repeat of history again in the Caribbean region, Madam Speaker?
Honorable member, could you kindly wind up, please?
Okay. Madam Speaker, in my conclusion, I would like to say a phrase by the founding father of our nation, Eric Williams, after our independence. Master day done, Madam Speaker. Therefore, there will be no more beating, no more ill treatment, and no more repression of all citizens in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you.
Member for Chaguanas West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I am very appalled by the views of the members of the government. Now, the members of the government, namely Barataria, San Juan, and Faizabad, claim that violence breeds violence and is a barbaric and tribalistic. Clearly, they do not know what corporal punishment is. Madam Speaker, allow me to define what corporal punishment is. Corporal punishment, as given by UNICEF, it is a practice of using physical force to inflict pain but not wounds as a means of punishment. Now, Madam Speaker, violence is defined as injury, death, abuse, and mental scarring to a child. Madam Speaker, based on my intuition, clearly both definitions are not coherent to each other.
Page 6, the member is reading from script.
Overrule, honorable member, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, based on my intuition, clearly both definitions are not coherent to each other. Madam Speaker, the honorable member for Orpuch West also stated mitigation measures to curb violence in schools such as homework centers, suspension, detention, etc. But clearly these sanctions are failing, hence the reason we are in this debate today. Madam Speaker, allow me to consider disjointed homes as homes are the primary socialization for children, Madam Speaker. When they are single parents, namely lack of father figures, Madam Speaker, to be teachers, they act as mentors, educators, and emotional and social upbringers. But when they're upset, Madam Speaker, who are there to bring these children? It's the teachers in schools, Madam Speaker. These teachers act as surrogate parents to these children, Madam Speaker. They are educators. They are emotional helpers and social helpers also, Madam Speaker. So when these teachers are not given the right of corporal punishment, but they see it fits to give it because they keep the children's interest in the best of their heart, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I am saying, as teachers, if corporal punishment is reintroduced back into the school system, along with all the other failing sanctions, Madam Speaker, this world will be a better place. Madam Speaker, I would like to conclude that as a woman, and I would like my child to enter the school system whereby there are teachers that help contribute to the effective and important upbringing of my child, Madam Speaker. If my child is in discipline, Madam Speaker, and corporal punishment is at the best interest in their heart, Madam Speaker, I say I am for that. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Minister of Tourism.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, let me say first of all, I am insulted that I am here today to debate this flawed motion based on misconstrued opinions and a clear misunderstanding of not only the individual and their psyche, but the law and the legal ramifications to the actions of members of the House. Madam Speaker, before I proceed any further, I would like to ask you whether or not I would be bombarded by the arbitrary use of points of order. Madam Speaker, I do hope that we are able to use our limited time to the best of our ability to debate this motion and debate what is in the best interest of the people and not to deal with party politics and that side for this side. Madam Speaker, I have a question. One question. How can we parallel the upsurgence of violence in schools to the removal of corporal punishment? Madam Speaker, I'm not sure if members on the other side have heard of the term ceteris paribus. It is a Latin term which is used to say all other factors remain constant. And if, Madam Speaker, we are to parallel the upsurgence of violence in schools to the removal of corporal punishment, all other factors involved in the process must have remained constant. And, Madam Speaker, this has not happened. Madam Speaker, I have listened attentively to the poppycock laid before this House by members on the other side. And I would like to go through step by step some of the that they have put before the House. The member for the Hocketa spoke about walking down the halls with a whip and bullying in schools. But my question is, do we have a problem with student-to-student bullying, but we want teachers to bully students? Madam Speaker, the members said that they would like to implement training and other processes to educate teachers. Our teachers are well educated in the first place. Second thing, there is no amount of training that can fix ethos or psychological factors that reside within the mental and emotional constructs of the individual. Madam Speaker, he said that they don't intend for it to reach the stage of abuse. But did we as a people intend for there to be economic downturn? No, we didn't, Madam Speaker. There are things that happen that we cannot plan for. There are things that happen that are beyond our control. And the individual teacher exercising their right to corporal punishment, stretching to the mark of abuse, we have no control over. Madam Speaker, they spoke about instilling fear. But the last time I checked, we live in a democracy. And if we wanted fear, it's best we had lived in a military state. Because, Madam Speaker, I believe each one of us has the right to live without fear and to be free. And you cannot be free if you are in fear, Madam Speaker. And we want our future leaders, the vision of tomorrow, to be free. Madam Speaker, the member for Talparo started using and calling, they like newspaper clippings, right? The member the member spoke about the increase in school safety officers and guidance counselors, etc., etc. But this government has a mandate not only to look after the students, but to look after the job security of the individuals, of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and by the reintroduction of corporal punishment, which is free. So the IADB knew that the vision and the plan of this government was not to reintroduce corporal punishment because that is free, but to put on strategic development to raise the bar of education and to raise the training with our students and teachers within the country. And not only that, Madam Speaker, let's look at the figures, right? In every school, there are 2 safety officers. And there's supposed to be at least 1 guidance counselor. How many jobs are you taking away if you reintroduce corporal punishment? There will be no need for these persons in each school. Think of that, Madam Speaker. They spoke about 11,000 persons being suspended, but we rather, as a government, we remove them from the school system temporarily and treat.
Honorable members, the speaking time of the honorable member for Caroni Central has expired.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the speaking time for the Honourable Member be extended by a further 3 minutes.
Honourable Members, the question is that the speaking time for the Honourable Member for Karun Central be extended by 3 minutes. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Member, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members of the House. Let me wrap up on my response to some of these statements. We rather remove them in the interim temporarily, treat whatever issues they may have, and reintroduce them to the system as well-grounded, moral and ethical citizens of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, finally I will just touch on the metropoles issue that we are adopting policies from metropoles. But Madam Speaker, why is our economy still afloat? Not because of the same metropoles that we want to come and bash in this House. So is it that we want to create an international scandal coming out of this House and our bashing of the metropoles? No, Madam Speaker. As the Minister of Tourism, I want to make it clear that this is not the position of the government, and whoever in this House has that opinion, I am sorry, when and if the citizens of Trinidad go make the mistake of electing them to be government, I pray for our country. Madam Speaker, let me skip all of this and go back to the Journal of Education Research by Song Yi Han, right, from the University of Missouri, Columbia. And he says, multiple student violence prevention programs and teacher training programs have fewer possibilities of use of corporal punishment, whereas schools that serve the greater percentage of ethnic minority students and special education students are 2.1 times and 1.8 times greater likelihood of the use of corporal punishment. What does that say, Madam Speaker? We have unscrupulous individuals that take abuse of the system, and we will not be giving them that power, that unchecked power to exercise over our students. Madam Speaker, this has been on the debate for the longest while, and in my conclusion, this debate is not something new. It has started in 2004. It mightn't be local, but it has been going on. And we, this government, have a responsibility to look after the best interest of our future. And with this, Madam Speaker, we maintain that we will not support the reintroduction of corporal punishment in schools. I thank you.
Member for Port of Spain South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm here to ask why when a child is punished at home, it is not a big deal. But when a child is punished at school, it's a big deal. Now, Madam Speaker, a child is at school for approximately 6 hours between the time of 8 to 8:30 a.m. until 2 to 3:30 p.m. Now, with these children being in school, a teacher is considered a surrogate parent to that child. Therefore, the teacher should be allowed to enforce discipline. Now, they say teachers are not trained to discipline a child. But Madam Speaker, I ask you, is a parent trained to discipline his or her child? No, my time is spared right now. I'm very sorry. Now, Madam Speaker, teachers are not there for only the academics of a child. They are there for the holistic development of a child as well. Now, I don't know about you, but I know that long ago, if I got licks in my school, I couldn't go home and tell mommy or daddy that I got licks, because I would have gotten more licks on top of the licks that I got from school. Madam Speaker, I am here to show you that licks instills fear in a child, but that fear teaches the child, you know what? I got licked for something that I did wrong. I don't want to get licked again, so I am not going to do what I did. Madam Speaker, if everyone here knows that there is a discipline matrix that is in every school in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, this discipline matrix helps to take action for offenses committed by a child. But tell me, Madam Speaker, how much time could two safety officers, a guidance counselor, and a dean talk to a child over and over and over again about the same act that the child commits every day or every week repeatedly? Now, Madam Speaker, I believe that there is too much violence, crime, and bullying in schools. And call me old time, but I know everything must change. But I still love my old time ways. Everyone could afford to live right, just to feel nice. Didn't need no paradise.
Standing order 36-1. Madam Speaker, the member is being irrelevant.
Overruled, member, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Now, as I was singing for you, Madam Speaker, now upon your eyes, look around. Smoke in the city, and everything that was pretty, crying out for sympathy. So I say, bring back the old time days. Bring back the old time days. Madam Speaker, I am here, and I stand firm on the belief that the reintroduction of corporal punishment would help and stop the violence and bullying in the schools in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
The Honorable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the member for Tableland said she was flabbergasted. Well, I stand, Madam Speaker, I am flabbergasted, bemused, bamboozled, confused. Madam Speaker, because of the vain attempts of the opposition to convince me to reintroduce corporal punishment. Madam Speaker, from the onset we were accosted by fallacious and contradictory statements by members of the opposition. In his opening statement, the member for La Hoqueta stated that we should not follow metropoles, yet he stated a renowned metropolitan agency, UNICEF, for his very definition of corporal punishment, which is the basis of his bill. Well, amendment, sorry. Madam Speaker, he then stated that teachers have to their avail many forms of disciplinary measures. Then stated that we should give them another corporal punishment. Now I might ask, how many forms of corporal punishment has the member for La Hoqueta defined? Madam Speaker, they said that you should use fear to create a mental ideology in students. Madam Speaker, but why not use rewards? Madam Speaker, he stated again, cultural imperialism, but stated from UNICEF. Where we not only got our laws with corporal punishment from England, which we were a colony of, which is a metropole, which was a metropole, and which shall be a metropole in the future. Madam Speaker, he stated that it would the teachers take lots of time out of their teaching time to discipline students with speaking. But how long would it take to administer corporal punishment to our students? Madam Speaker, I believe that students should have respect for their teachers, not a fear of their teachers, not a fear of the school environment, not a fear of coming to school, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the member for Tableland also stated that we should speak about bullying. And she defined bullying as verbal or physical actions meant to cause harm, mental or psychological or physical, to a person. Madam Speaker, when a student is corporally punished, which is physical violence to that student, that is adding fuel to the bullies to verbally berate that student. Oh, you get licks, you get cut tail in front of the whole class, because that is where that corporal punishment takes place, stated by the members of the opposition. Madam Speaker,
they stated that teachers cannot use the methods that they have currently. But I have yet to see a teacher send a student to a suspension center. I have yet to hear of that. Most of these things that are implemented by the government has yet to be fully utilized by the teachers, yet we are here trying to bring back something that we removed in place of these things. Firstly, we should try to bring these to a standard and then move forward. And if somewhere down the line these measures actually do not work, then we can even consider this barbaric proposition by the opposition. Manchika, the member stated initially that there were no sanctions in place by the government, then continued to say that he was a member of a sanctioned organization in his schooling system. How then can I listen to somebody who contradicts himself in one sentence? Manchika, the member for Talparo, stated that he loves the old ways, as well as the member for Port of Spain South. Manchika, slavery is an old way. War is an old way. Back in the old time days, when you had a cut on your foot and it got infected, you would remove the entire foot. Manchika, do we like those old time ways? Manchika, I again must reiterate the proper implementation and use of suspension, expulsion, detention, counseling, Madam Speaker. Those things are there and it can be utilized given the correct training and time taken by teachers.
Honorable members, the speaking time for the honorable member for move on has expired.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the speaking time for the honourable member be extended by a further 3 minutes.
Honourable members, the question is that the speaking time of the honourable member for move on be extended by 3 minutes. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it, member. You may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, House. Madam Speaker, the member for Kumutu Manzanilla stated that we should use whipping to beat out bad behaviors when applied to the buttocks or arms. But slavery used whipping to beat out bad behavior, and in that time, freedom was a bad behavior. Madam Speaker, who is to define what is bad behavior? Who is there to control these teachers? Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in the past 13 years, there have been instances of corporal punishment, and it is illegal. Imagine what would happen when corporal punishment, or if corporal punishment, is made legal again. Those teachers that did not do it shall do it, and the ones that did it while it was illegal shall take it further. Madam Speaker. Again, Madam Speaker, fully defined. Just remember of Kumutu Manzanilla when he stated that whipping on the buttocks or arms, but he did not state to the extent to which this shall take place. Madam Speaker, again the member for Pointe-a-Pierre stated that we shall not use corporal punishment to bring fear, but yet every other member of the opposition used the word fear in their speeches. Contradictions yet again. Madam Speaker, the members of the government were lambasted by, well, apparently we were hurting the feelings of the opposition because he continuously used the point of information improper, hurtful language or something like that. Madam Speaker, I would assume that we would sit here today and take into consideration what is said rather than be heard.
Honorable member.
We received $2 million from something in 2011, and I would like to ask, what would we use the whips for? What would we use the money for? To buy matching whips for the teachers? This House, but on the merits of the debate and their own moral compass, and for the betterment of the society of Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you.
Member for Stanley Grande.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I think I've been sitting here in my comfy chair for about 2 hours. And 3 words I could use to describe this government: arrogance, animosity, and acrimony, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, they don't seem to be aware of the issues that is going on in this country at this point in time. But Madam Speaker, they even saying it, they say we like newspapers. Apparently the member for Arima and the member for Mova don't like to read the Express and so forth. But Madam Speaker, I would like to inform you this morning. Madam Speaker, how would it feel to you when you read an article like, Shogun's student beaten up, robbed by a gang of 8, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, how you feel when you read an article like, 4-month student beaten up his typing teacher, Madam Speaker, February 2011? Or Madam Speaker, from my own constituency, I want to quote from Newsday, October 2013, the 8th, Madam Speaker, not too long ago. Also making headlines was an attack of a 12-year-old female student, a United States citizen who was beaten up in a Sandy Grande secondary school. Madam Speaker, what is in front of these government members' eyes? What is blocking them from seeing what is right before you, that crime is on a rise since the year 2000, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, they like to talk about how we only saying 11,000 students were suspended. That's 11,000, I think remember then stated, that's 11,000 in 6 years, huh? Well, they say in the report from the Minister of Education, he said 3,300 in only 1 year, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this government action, this sanction is based on getting rid of the student because they're causing trouble. Why? Because the government, at the fault of the government, at the cost of the government, Madam Speaker.
Will the member give way?
No, sir. I am very pressed for time. I have a lot of things to tell about this morning. Madam Speaker, at the cost of the government, they are just trying to get rid of these students, Madam Speaker, for a period of what? 1 day? 7 days? 21 days, 28 days, deprivation, Madam Speaker, of the child's right of education, just so quoted by the Lavender Westminster. You like to talk about rights? What are you doing to students, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, I have something to tell the Caroni Central member. Because you talk about homework centers and suspension centers. Sir, I believe, Madam Speaker, is just a fragment of our imagination. Because according to July the 10th of 2013, the Minister of Education said suspension centers coming soon. So what suspension centers is he talking about, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, he want to talk about he haven't heard of a teacher to send a student to a suspension center. It have no suspension center present.
Will the member give way?
No, sir. I told you already. I have more things to tell this government. Madam Speaker, I'm now getting to taste the pepper in the doubles because apparently, Madam Speaker, this government proposed Project Peace in 2003 after they removed corporal punishment. Madam Speaker, the basis of Project Peace, was on counseling and rehabilitation. Madam Speaker, according to a counselor in 2011, a report from the Ministry of Education Supports Division, they were not renewing the contracts of these counselors, the so-said social workers, the so-said psychologists that supposed to rehabilitate these students. For 3 years, Madam Speaker, the time period of 2007 and 2010, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Education was only able to account for 2,088 students being able to receive holistic level of individual counseling, according to the Minister of Education in 2013, July the 21st. So, Madam Speaker, corporal punishment was removed for frivolous reasons, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this opposition wants corporal punishment to be brought back, Madam Speaker, to mend the bridge that this government has broken down since the year 2000. Madam Speaker, I ask the opposition, I don't know if their hearts are cold, if it's made of stone, if it's dried up, but I want to ask the government, Madam Speaker, how can
Honorable members, may I remind this chamber that offensive and insulting language are not to be used. Also, the speaking time for the honorable member for Stanley Grande has expired.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the speaking time for the honorable member for Stanley Grande be extended by 3 minutes.
Honorable members, the question is that the speaking time of the honorable member for Stanley Grande be extended by 3 minutes. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? I think the ayes have it. Honorable member, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and the colleagues in this House. Madam Speaker, I was at the point where I wanted to show a graphic image where this mother, Madam Speaker, and I asked the government members to take a good look at the picture. I'm sorry if my colored printer wasn't working last night, so I had to print it black and white, but it still conveys, Madam Speaker, the horrific, Madam Speaker, the event that took place, Madam Speaker, of this year. Madam Speaker, the 27th of May 2013, Madam Speaker, this mother was the one that had to suffer a child, her only 14-year-old child, Madam Speaker, being stabbed to death on the school compound over a girl, Madam Speaker. Have this government any compassion and sympathy for the people of Trinidad and Tobago, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, I want to close by saying this government needs to understand the importance of this motion. This motion is where this opposition is rather being proactive rather than the reactive government that we have stand before us. Madam Speaker, this opposition is actually trying to mend the bridge, as I said, of discipline that was broken down. Madam Speaker, when a child leaves home and is being disciplined, when he walks out the door and he starts to take his shirt out of his pants, Madam Speaker, it shows where the discipline bridge has fallen short, Madam Speaker, and corporal punishment, if added to the list of sanctions, Madam Speaker, will bring that bridge back to form, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I end with a quote from the Bible, King James, it's as the member for Talparo probably quoted. The Proverbs chapter 22, verse 15, it says, foolishness is bound to the heart of a child. Madam Speaker, Proverbs is a chapter of wisdom. It didn't say use suspensions. It didn't say use detention. It didn't say use any frivolous and whimsical methods, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker.
Honorable member, kindly wind up, please.
Yes, sorry, Madam Speaker. I'm winding up here. It said, Madam Speaker, that the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
The Honorable Minister of Finance and the Economy.
Madam Speaker, given the opposition's high debating rounds, I am struck to the quick. Yet still, it is unfortunate that they have made such fundamentally flawed assumptions. It is unfortunate that they see but one side to their argument. And furthermore, Madam Speaker, it is unfortunate that they have chosen to support the defective, dangerous methods of corporal punishment in our schools. Madam Speaker, the member for Sangre Grande wants to talk about horrific incidents. Let me remind this chamber of something. On November 9, 2010, Caroline Kisoon of the Trinidad Express reported a police probe of abuse by a female teacher who allegedly slammed a 7-year-old errant infant into a wall. That is horrific incident, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, let me quote some sociologists here today, Madam Speaker, because the member for Tableland says that corporal punishment, and I quote from here, i.e. a lash. It is asserted by Dobbs, Smith, Taylor, Hodgkin, and Sharp that the gentle slap is a myth, since there is often use of levels of force that could be harmful. The blow may strike a vulnerable area of the body, or the child may fall and damage his or herself. Madam Speaker, this clearly shows that administering a lash or a gentle slap eventually and almost always turns into abuse, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, let me point out something. This government is not so desperate to win this debate that, like the member of Talparo, we have to use the name of His Excellency in the chamber to sway the argument. Madam Speaker, we are not so desperate because we believe we don't need to go down there, Madam Speaker. Spare the rod and spoil the child, Madam Speaker. We've heard it once, and hopefully after what I say here, we will not have to hear it again, because the Honorable Mrs. Kamala Prasad Bisasa said, and I quote, "Spare the rod and spoil the child" is an age-old adage that belongs in the archives, not in schools. Madam Speaker, the member for St. Joseph compared the situation in Barbados. And Madam Speaker, I agree with the comparison. It is a good comparison. But on doing my research, and I hope that the member of St. Joseph takes in the future, that on the UNICEF website, I came across an article, Madam Speaker, and I quote from the UNICEF representative in Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean, Tom Olson. "All international and regional studies which we have done with children themselves, speaking out about corporal punishment and how discipline is enforced in schools, show it doesn't work." End quotation. The article goes on to say, while corporal punishment is on the rise, and this is Barbados we are talking about, Madam Speaker, while corporal punishment is on the rise, poor behavior among young people in Barbados is not declining. Teachers, principals, and government officials are quick to point out that schools are actually losing control of their students. Madam Speaker, if we make corporal punishment legal in schools, as the member for St. Joseph so rightly pointed out, we have a close bond, Madam Speaker, to Barbados, similar history, similar legislature. And who's to say that these dreadful consequences will not be in Trinidad and Tobago, Madam Speaker, as a result of this? Madam Speaker, let me quote two more sociologists, but this time the chamber may be familiar with them, Madam Speaker. Kerwin and Mendler, as the opposition leader so stated, Madam Speaker. But if the opposition leader had taken the time to continue to read the article, he would have noted that Kerwin and Mendler said, "The key to effective discipline is not one of control or the quick mastery techniques, but love and understanding, which assists classroom management and teaches students to take responsibility for their behavior." Madam Speaker, let me ask you, is that not what we want in Trinidad and Tobago? Do we not want a child that was violent, that was a bully? Do we not want that child to one day come forward and say, "Yes, I was violent. Yes, I was a bully. Yes, I abused my peers, my students, even my teachers. But thanks to the work of the government and the non-violent methods"?
Honorable members, the speaking time of the honorable member for Diego Martin Central has expired.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the speaking time of the honourable member be extended by a further 3 minutes.
Honourable members, the question is that the speaking time of the honourable member for Diego Martin Central be extended by 3 minutes. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Member, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you to the chamber. As I was saying, do we not want that child to say, "Yes, I was violent, deviant, abused teachers and students"? But thanks to the government, the non-violent methods, thanks to peer mediation, thanks to guidance counsellors, thanks to Student Support Services Limited, which will be in all schools by the year 2015, Madam Speaker. Thanks to those non-violent methods, I can say that I have seen where I have gone wrong. I have moved away from my violent past, Madam Speaker, and I thank these people for their non-violent methods, showing me where I went wrong, for showing love and concern and compassion. No, thank you, ma'am. Sir, I have my 3 minutes already. Do you not want this person then come forward and say, "I have changed because of these methods"? I ask you, Madam Speaker, will these children ever be able to come to this self-realization and understanding by the use of corporal punishment, Madam Speaker? Whips don't talk, hands don't talk, Madam Speaker. People just talk. People just talk. Love and compassion, Madam Speaker. If we go on to a report by Mrs. Cherise Clark entitled "Corporal Punishment in Trinidad, a Dilemma of Childhood Discipline." These are people in the school system I'm going to talk about. A student says, "You take the hit, you get your blue marks, that's it. Because these days they don't lash again, they just cough now." A student says that. A teacher goes on, she says, "Praise wasn't the opposite of disapproval. Approval was no disapproval. So they didn't get compliments." Madam Speaker, compound this with the Caribbean Human Development Report 2012, which says, "Use of corporal punishment in schools has been linked to youth violence. and that because students were beaten but rarely praised or received kind words from their teachers, corporal punishment served mainly to alienate and cause resentment among students. Madam Speaker, what a sad day it is in Trinidad and Tobago when we can say that when a student is violent, deviant, does something wrong, they get corporal punishment as a result. And it happens so often, and so much so, that when that same student turns around and does something good, something positive, gets an achievement, their reward is a lack of corporal punishment, Madam Speaker. What is that, Madam Speaker? Are we going to promote that? Not at all. Madam Speaker, thank you for your time.
Member for Tobago East.
Yes, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want you to look at me very good. Look at me. Madam Speaker, I am a product of good licks. And I'm proud to say that, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in this government, I see hate, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I see acrimony. Madam Speaker, I see bitterness. Madam Speaker, I see ignorance. And Madam Speaker, I see a government that has gone totally out of control.
Why is the members imputing improper motives to this government?
Honorable members, may I remind you all not to impute improper motives, please. Honorable member, you may continue.
Yes, Madam Speaker. Now, Madam Speaker, the member for Tabakit, who is also the Minister of National Security, he talked about coming down from Mount Olympus, I think it was. Now, Madam Speaker, when we're talking about Mount Olympus, why don't the government come down from Mount Olympus and explain to the parents of Ronaldo Dixie and sympathize with them as to why he was killed on that day, Madam Speaker? Why? Madam Speaker, the member for Barataria, Arima, as well as Lavantil West, Madam Speaker, quoting international organizations. And also, I must say, Madam Speaker, that the member for Faizabad talking about anarchy. Does she know what anarchy means, Madam Speaker? Now, let me say something, Madam Speaker. When we're looking at international organizations, why we continue to use their way, their standards? Their policies are damaging our society. And look at the crime rate, Madam Speaker. And the member for Arima, you seem to like quotes, and I would quote for you. In 2000, the crime rate was 117. In 2008, 550. In 2013, which is today, Madam Speaker, the crime rate is 300 and over. So I think you need to pick up a statistic book and learn, because that is statistics. Now, Madam Speaker, when we're talking about, I want to take a theoretical approach now, Madam Speaker. Let's look at the concept of liberalism, and let's look at the concept of realism. This government is taking a liberalist approach. Madam Speaker, they're talking about cooperation. They see the importance of non-state actors such as UNICEF and the UN and all these different guys. But they are also taking a utopian mindset, Madam Speaker. They need to look at society and look at it for how it is and not how it ought to be. That is how they have to look at it, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I would also like to sympathize with my colleague from St. Joseph, who also talked about classical conditioning. I would like to talk about operant conditioning. Yes, operant conditioning, which was put forward by a guy named B.F. Skinner. Now, B.F. Skinner talked about operant condition taking on two components, which is rewards and punishment. Now, I find it very amazing, Madam Speaker, that within operant conditioning, the promise or possibility of rewards causes an increase in behavior. Now, isn't that nice? And the reward that this government is giving primary school, secondary school students is suspension, detention, Project Peace, all these different things, which is causing a greater rise in crime in our country. So what is the effectiveness of this? And this is what this government is asking. What is the effectiveness of your programs? Madam Speaker, I also like to talk that the use of punishment can be used to decrease or prevent undesirable behavior, such as the formation of gangs, such as the whole notion of Gaza and Gully. What is this concept being developed in our school? This is not a war. This is not something that the students should be fighting. This is Trinidad and Tobago, and we must respect the rights of the children. Madam Speaker, in closing, I would just like to say, Madam Speaker, that you see, students stab students, fighting breakout in school in South. We must not see these articles being put forward in our newspapers. We must not see it anymore, Madam Speaker. It must be dealt with in a swift manner. And I'm calling on the Minister of National Security to do something now, because more than ever, the people of Trinidad and Tobago is depending on you.
Honorable members, the speaking time of the Honorable Member for Tobago East has expired.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the speaking time for the Honorable Member for Tobago East be extended by 3 minutes.
Honorable members, the question is that the speaking time of the Honorable Member for Tobago East be extended by 3 minutes. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? I think the ayes have it. Honorable Member, you may continue.
Yes, Madam Speaker. Now, Madam Speaker, when we look at Project Peace, when we look at the peer mediation program, when we look at student calls, yes, these are good programs, I agree. But if we look at last year, Madam Speaker, 2,200 students were suspended. And that is why we are talking about the effectiveness of this program. Therefore, we are calling for the reinstatement of corporal punishment. Now, Madam Speaker, we are not saying to beat the entire school, Madam Speaker. No, we are not saying that. Madam Speaker, there's a minority and we must deal with this minority because we must stop rewarding deviant behavior. Madam Speaker, I know that dealing with the school violence in our school is a very hard task. And I know that if we come together, if government and opposition come together, we can deal with it. We can deal with the problems. So I am saying today, government and opposition come together. So because if we don't, then God help us. Thank you.
The Honorable Minister of Local Government.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, today I am astonished at what the opposition has brought towards the government today. You know, Madam Speaker, I sat here and I kept noticing that they only studied the teachers. What about the students? Oh, they want to give the teachers rights to be children. But have they considered what the children have a part to play in this? I noticed also that many of the members of the opposition use the definition of corporal punishment from the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child, right? And it quotes, any punishment in which physical force is used, ... I shall not waste my time reading the entire definition. But also, what they have failed to further read or realize that there was another paragraph below that from the side that they read it from. And it says, in part with this definition, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe considered and stated that any corporal punishment of children is in breach of their fundamental right to human dignity and physical integrity. The fact that such corporal punishment is still lawful in certain member states violates their equally fundamental right to the same legal protection as adults. The social and legal acceptance of corporal punishment of children must be ended. So, Madam Speaker, if a large organization as the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe stated that, who are we? Who are we? And as I recall, the member for La Hoqueta stated that we cannot be compared to other countries in Europe, America. But Madam Speaker, as I look around, everyone here is of different ethnic backgrounds. We have East Indians, we have Africans, we may have Chinese, Syrians. So doesn't all that have to play in the cultural addition in Trinidad and Tobago? So I want to bring to your attention some names of some countries. And you might ask, what do these countries have in particular? They all ban corporal punishment and have severe penalties for it. Countries such as Austria, Costa Rica, Iceland, Israel, Netherlands, New Zealand, Portugal, Spain, Sweden, Romania, Uruguay, Venezuela, and Ukraine. And I want to point out one particular country that really caught my eye, and that is Finland. In the year 1983, they banned corporal punishment in their country. And as we look today, as the last year report stated, that Finland has the highest educational system in the world. So who are we not to try to adopt a measure from their society? The members of the government might be stating that I am only calling countries from Europe, Asia. Well, let me call from another paper, Madam Speaker. According to the Prohibiting Corporal Punishment of Children in the Caribbean Progress Report 2012, I have a short list here, but it is very important. The Bahamas, Belize, Dominica, Haiti, Jamaica, and Puerto Rico have all banned corporal punishment. I just want to take a little quote from one or two of the countries. Dominica: a permit holder operating a facility shall ensure that no child while attending the facility is subjected to emotional, physical, or sexual abuse, or to physical emotional neglect, or to shaking, shoving, hitting, spanking, or any other form of corporal punishment. One more. In Jamaica, a child in place of safety, school, children's home, or child in the care of a fit person shall have the following rights: to be free from corporal punishment. Before I resume my seat, I would also like to back up what the Minister of Education said. The teachers are prepared and are well taught in dealing with children, though they might not be suited to deal corporal punishment, but they have also done psychology in their degrees, and I am sure all of our teachers in Trinidad and Tobago are qualified and are suited to do this. My opposition called theories. Well, Madam Speaker, let me call some theories too. There is the multiple intelligence theory proposed by Dr. Howard.
To speak in time for the honourable member of Tunapuna has expired.
I beg to move that the speaking time for the honourable member be extended by a further 3 minutes.
Honourable members, the question is that the speaking time for the honourable member of Tunapuna be extended by 3 minutes. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Member, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I was saying, proposed by Dr. Howard Gardner in 2006, stated that children have certain forms of intelligence, and teachers were taught in their training how to deal with the different behaviors and how to teach children with these sort of intelligence. Also, there is the Erickson stages of development theory, where teachers learn the different stages of development in a child. So doesn't that mean they are well equipped to handle different behaviors and different wrongdoings of children? They are well equipped to do this. And Madam Speaker, I close with saying that I want the opposition to stop thinking about the teachers for a minute and think about the students. As I recall, the member for Komuto Manzanella stated that you can't bend an old tree. We're not comparing children to trees here. They are human beings. So, Madam Speaker, I close with saying that corporal punishment should stay illegal in Trinidad and Tobago and not give the right to teachers to be students. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honourable members, It is now 12:30 p.m. This House will now suspend for 1 hour for lunch and will resume at 1:30 p.m.
The Honorable Speaker.
We welcome you to the 11th National Youth Parliament, which takes place on Monday, October 28th, 2013.
The Honorable Member for St. Augustine.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, now this morning, the Honorable Member for Laventille West made a statement that when corporal punishment is administered to students, it has a negative psychological and emotional effect on them. Madam Speaker, I would just like to say the perspective of that honorable member is one-sided and incomplete. Madam Speaker, according to B.F. Skinner's theory of operant conditioning, and I quote, punishment decreases the likelihood of the unwanted behavior. Madam Speaker, we on the opposition side today are saying that given the state of our nation's schools, violence and bullying are heading to catastrophic proportions at schools in this country. As a consequence of this, Madam Speaker, corporal punishment should be reintroduced into schools without further delay. Madam Speaker, corporal punishment is not simply a matter of beating, big beating little. The punishment has to come with an explanation as to why the punishment is being meted out. An explanation of what was wrong about the student's behavior which warrants the punishment. Madam Speaker, there's a famous quote, and we all like to quote today. Madam Speaker, one must get burned to learn. According to this statement, in the 21st century, Madam Speaker, in order for a child to learn a lesson or to never to repeat an inappropriate behavior, corporal punishment should be administered. Madam Speaker, according to Sharice Clark, Caribbean Journal of Cultural Studies, Volume 1, corporal punishment should be reintroduced because as a result of it, it made us grow up to become responsible, civilized, and disciplined citizens. Madam Speaker, I share the sentiment of my fellow colleague, the Honourable Member of Tobago East, that I could rightfully say I am a product of good licks as well. Madam Speaker, had it not been for corporal punishment, I would not have been here today. I would not have been responsible and civilized and disciplined as I am today. Madam Speaker, as a child, when we broke a rule or acted in an inappropriate manner, corporal punishment was administered. And as a result, we learned to respect the customs, the norms, and the rules of our society, as well as to learn to act in a polite manner, helping us to grow up as well-behaved, civilized, and disciplined citizens. Madam Speaker, one of the aims of the education system is to create a safe environment where learning can take place by all students. Now, Madam Speaker, when students fear going to school because of their contemporaries, the education system is failing these students whose experiences are made difficult by a defiant few. Madam Speaker, there needs to be a way of dealing with these students who display aggression, such that they are not allowed to disrupt another's education, but which serves to help that defiant student. Madam Speaker, what I'm recommending here today is, yes, use corporal punishment for its deterrent effect, but use it in conjunction with counseling and the support of the students who have perpetrated the violence. Madam Speaker, there has to be a reason why the student is acting the way he or she is behaving. And these reasons need to be addressed. But at the same time, that student needs to understand that having their own issues to deal with is no excuse for exhibiting violence towards another student, and such behavior will not be allowed or tolerated. Madam Speaker, As a result of all these incidents of violence and bullying taking place in among our great country, Trinidad and Tobago, Madam Speaker, it is recommended that corporal punishment should be reintroduced into our schools today without further delay. I thank you.
The Honorable Minister of Energy and Energy Affairs.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker, members of the government and members of the opposition. Madam Speaker, this morning, I do not plan to stay my whole speaking time, Madam Speaker. Reason being is, what this opposition has proposed is pitiful this morning, Madam Speaker, and this government shall not stand here and debate such false accusations, such improper constructs that are being put forward this morning, Madam Speaker. And just to clear up something, Madam Speaker, the member of Port of Spain South, I would just like to highlight to her, Madam Speaker, that this prestigious house is not Baker's Scouting for Talent or Digital Rising Stars, Madam Speaker, and that singing is unacceptable here, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, further on, I would like to state that this morning what the opposition have postulated is definitions of corporal punishment in terms of European societies, in terms of the UN, UNICEF, and all these other statutory boards, Madam Speaker. However, we must face reality. We are in Trinidad and Tobago, and what we must do as a government and opposition is to unmask corporal punishment for what it really is. And that is any act of intent in the form of physical punishment. Madam Speaker, let me note that what the opposition has done today, Madam Speaker, is take combating violence in its literal meaning, Madam Speaker, and they are literally trying to combat against violence. Madam Speaker, let me further state that this society that we populate, Madam Speaker, is one that is faced with a reaction. And let me highlight that every action is faced with that reaction, Madam Speaker. And the action that my dear opposition proposes this morning is corporal punishment. So what this government must now analyze, Madam Speaker, is what are the reactions? And the reactions are what will come from the students, Madam Speaker. However, these actions, Madam Speaker, if I may highlight, are the possible outbreaks of gangs or student and teachers war, Madam Speaker. And this prestigious government shall not tolerate this type of nonsense, Madam Speaker. Let me highlight. The Ministry of Education released an article entitled, "Violence is not discipline, and discipline should never be violence." And I quote, Madam Speaker, "Trinidad and Tobago is a signatory to the UN's Convention on the Rights of the Child, and as such, the government upholds and enforces Article 19.1 of the said convention, which states, state parties shall take all appropriate legislative, administrative, and educational measures to protect the child from all forms of physical or mental violence, injury or abuse, neglect or negligent treatment, maltreatment or exploitation, including sexual abuse, while in the care of parents, legal guardians, or any other person who has the care of the child, Madam Speaker." I would also like to highlight that what is mainly proposed by this pitiful opposition this morning, Madam Speaker, they are so misleading and so misguided that they actually reconstructed the term violence into the term discipline, Madam Speaker. And this shall not be accepted by this government. Madam Speaker, let me further go on to say that we are living in a civilized society. Therefore, the opposition proposition of the ideology of slavery and primitive times, Madam Speaker, shall not be accepted in this civilized society. Meaning that we are a progressive civilization. And gearing towards a 2020 vision, Madam Speaker, this government is not willing to go backwards 13 years prior to now, Madam Speaker. To end on a note, let me say that children must not be victims of any form of violence, especially physical violence, in the name of discipline. And legally and morally, children are entitled to care, security, and a good upbringing. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Point 14.
Madam Speaker, I rise to join my colleagues in advocating for the reintroduction of corporal punishment into the schools. As a nation, there is a need for us to revisit our traditional values, which has made us a civil and disciplined society. It is amazing, Madam Speaker, the levels of indiscipline in our nation's schools today. Indiscipline is at an astronomical level. Our teachers are at their wits' end in dealing with this indiscipline in our schools. It is all well and good for those on the sidelines to sit and whine about corporal punishment being morally wrong and outrageous. But, Madam Speaker, they are not on the ground. They are not with the teachers, the ones who have been faced with the terrors these students have become. Madam Speaker, if you ask teachers, those on the front lines, those who fear the disruptive students 5 days a week, they say that they want corporal punishment to be brought back into the school system. They say that they want corporal punishment as an additional method to deal with the disruptive students in the nation's schools. No, sir. Madam Speaker, those methods that they have currently do not work. Suspension does not work. Community service does not work. Madam Speaker, giving lines has never worked. Madam Speaker, given the gravity of the problem, we are left with little option. Point of order. 33 from her speech.
Honorable members, may I remind you all not to read from the speech. You may refer to your speech for guidelines, but do not read for your speech. Honorable member, you can continue.
Madam Speaker, we are left with little option. Reintroducing corporal punishment is the way. Madam Speaker, the use of corporal punishment is in itself a deterrent to bullies. Madam Speaker, we need to give the bullies some licks to show them that they are not in control of the schools. Madam Speaker, the best way to control a bully is to beat a bully.
May the member give way?
No, sir. The truth is, most of us are here because we got a little flogging. I wish to end by sharing an anecdote. When I was in primary school and we started doing mental math, on one occasion, I got 5 sums out of 10 correct. Madam Speaker, I got 5 lashes for those 5 sums that I got wrong. And from that day, I got 10 sums right every time. Madam Speaker, it is not the desire of the opposition to ignore the other disciplinary measures, but we are just here to say that corporal punishment should be added to the ones that are already there to make an impact and change the indiscipline in our nation's schools. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Minister of Public Utilities.
Madam Speaker, I wish to issue a public apology to every single citizen within the confines of Trinidad and Tobago for the mere fact that the opposition is making a mockery out of this parliament. The very place that these citizens have asked to come into power, to protect their rights, to work with them and to seek their interests is now compromising their rights and endangering the lives of their children, Madam Speaker, what have we become? I have prepared several points for today, but it seems as though I will spend my entire time refuting the horribly constructed arguments of the opposition. First of all, the member for St. Joseph gave an example of a student who loves to watch TV, yet because she did something wrong, her mother banned her from watching TV. Madam Speaker, I thought she was on the side to instill corporal punishment. We are merely doing the same thing. She did not beat the child. Similarly, we are sending the children to suspension centers, giving them detention, things along that line. Madam Speaker, contradictions within contradictions. I wonder if the opposition has spent more than 5 minutes plotting out this motion, much less preparing.
Would the member give way?
Unfortunately for you, ma'am, I may not be able to do so right now. The member for Chaguanas West proudly boasted, I am a woman and I am for that. Madam Speaker, if you're a woman and you are proud to say that you will send your child to school to be beaten, I am ashamed for her and all other women who think along that line.
Will the member give way?
Unfortunately for you, again, I will not be able to. My time is really against me now. I continue as well. May I remind her that within Trinidad and Tobago, we have both female and male teachers. The slap that a female teacher will administer to a child is completely different to that of a male teacher. The member for La Hoqueta declared that corporal punishment must be administered at the discretion of the teacher. Madam Speaker, what is in my opinion may not be the same as what he may say corporal punishment is. I can administer one sound slap to a child, whereas he may think that it may be a small tap, like don't do that. That is not corporal punishment, Madam Speaker. I move on. The member for Sangre Grande accused this government of saying, have you, meaning the government, no compassion for mothers, and showed a graphic picture of a mother weeping for her child. Madam Speaker, it is ironic to say that they are on the very side compromising the rights of a child and beating them. How is that compassionate? Contradiction, Madam Speaker. I move on to member for Tobago East, who apparently loves statistics as well. Well, let me tell you, I have one for you as well, sir. Madam Speaker, he claims that over 300 crimes have been committed. Need I remind this minister that over 87% of these crimes were committed by people who were corporally punished, i.e. before 13 years ago. Madam Speaker, member after member from the opposition, starting from Talparo, goes straight down to the last member who spoke, claimed that all of our sanctions have not worked and have in fact failed. But here I have a statistic from the UNDP report of 2012, which stated it is perhaps too early in many cases to fully assess the success of various programs implemented in the Caribbean. Madam Speaker, they have had hundreds of years of corporal punishment, yet it never worked. 13 years ago, it was abolished, yet now they choose to bring back the same motion. Madam Speaker, what have they prepared for us today? Have they thought of this motion? Absolutely not. I wish to quote again from a psychologist who is a member of the Committee of the Rights of a Child, who in 2011 stated, teachers must go beneath the skin of the brain and your heart to appeal to your reason and to inspire you. Corporal punishment is violence, demeaning, aggressive, and is disciplinary instruction, which only teaches our children that the only way to resolve the conflict is by resorting to violence. Madam Speaker, I urge both members of the government and opposition today to vote along the lines of morals and ethics and not along lines of party politics and party affiliations. Thank you.
Honourable members, the speaking time of the Honourable Member for Dabadi O'Meara has expired.
Sir, I beg to move that the speaking time for the Honourable Member be extended by a further 3 minutes.
Honourable members, the question is that the speaking time for the Honourable Member for Dabadi O'Meara has be extended by 3 minutes. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Member, you may continue.
Okay, I see as though I have more time now to contradict and to point out their flaws. Madam Speaker, two members, in fact, Tobago East and the other one I really can't remember right now, claim that they are both products of corporal punishment. Madam Speaker, I have not been corporally punished, yet I stand here today as a proper citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, I ask you and the rest of Trinidad and Tobago to note who is in opposition and who is in government. As such, I would like to conclude my statement at this point in time before they claim that I am bashing them and using more unparliamentary language, as they might feel hurtful again. Madam Speaker, again I come. Please vote along the lines of morals and ethics and not according to party affiliation. Thank you.
The Honourable Member Faruka.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I think it's about time that we agree on one thing today. Every child deserves their basic needs, food, water, and shelter, being provided. However, we can clearly see that how we have difference in opinions when it comes to the development of a child. We, the opposition, confidently support that corporal punishment is needed to discipline a child so that he or she can become a productive and respectable product of society. Corporal punishment can be used as a disciplinary method since it maintains control. All we want to do is basically show the students that there have consequences to their action, Madam Speaker. They should be forced to think twice before they act. There should be a sense of fear, not fear of being afraid, but fear to respect that teacher, to show that, hey, we can't just show disrespect to our teacher and then say the laws are protecting us, they can't touch us. Okay.
Aware that criminals convicted of felonies are not allowed to be beaten in our correction system. Therefore, why must we beat the future of our country?
Dr. Diana Bomrin, a world-renowned clinical and development psychologist, found that children who were never spanked tended to have behavioral problems, and probably that's why they end up in jail. Corporal punishment can serve as a long-term lesson to remind students that every bad action has consequences. So, in conclusion,
60 members reading from script.
Honourable members, may I remind you all not to read from your script once again. Honourable member, you may continue.
Well, let me just wrap up. In conclusion, we, the opposition, wish to reintroduce corporal punishment to provide teachers with an additional method to counter the negative behaviors displayed by students. I thank you.
The Honourable Minister of National Diversity and Social Integration.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have come to a general consensus that the opposition are aliens of the truth. Madam Speaker, they are simply orchestrating violence as a suitable means in counteracting violence. Madam Speaker, they are linking a barbaric act to conform to civility. Madam Speaker, these two cannot go together. They are a non-functional walking oxymoron. Madam Speaker, I would like to draw an example from the book entitled Children First, written by Penelope Leach. It states, when a big kid hits a little kid on the playing ground, we call him a bully. 5 years later, when he punches a woman for her wallet, he is called a mugger. Later still, when he slugs a fellow worker, he is called a troublemaker. But when he becomes a father and hits his tiresome, disobedient child, we call him a disciplinarian. Why in this ladder of violence, the father's role is regarded differently from the rest? Madam Speaker, my Ministry of National Diversity and Social Integration's mandates are built upon inclusiveness, equity, social justice, and sustainable human development. Madam Speaker, how we as a people are going to be inclusive and foster participation when corporal punishment is used as a main means in correcting behavioral issues within our schooling system. Madam Speaker, what indeed it does is alienates the individual from the rest of the school population, and it opens the door for the ridiculing of that individual by his or her peers. Madam Speaker, what the opposition is sure to guarantee is to impart low self-esteem and self-worth upon these students. Madam Speaker, this is a clear violation of a mandate under my ministry, and I therefore cannot stand for this. Madam Speaker, what is needed is an upgrade, a serious upgrade of our schooling system. Many of the nation's schools are filled with guidance counselors who mainly focus on guiding students along their career paths. Madam Speaker, what is needed is a support system in all schools whereby there are school psychologists along with these guidance counselors to provide therapy for students who may be highly disruptive as they may suffer from a learning disorder which hampers their development. Madam Speaker, another crucial mandate under my ministry is equity, equality for all. Madam Speaker, the Honourable Member for Port of Spain South brought up the issue of a disciplinary matrix. Madam Speaker, I have never seen beating within a disciplinary matrix. Maybe the archaic thinkers of the opposition are planning on inventing one. Madam Speaker, I ask the members of the opposition, would the use of corporal punishment be fair across the board? Or would the Ministry of Education have to employ physicists to calculate the intensity, force, and acceleration of each blow to ensure that the system is fair for all? Madam Speaker, the opposition is applying a formula which is a recipe for disaster. Madam Speaker, one thing we have to examine is our teacher-student ratio. Approximately, there's one teacher to 35 to 40 students. Madam Speaker, teachers are not getting the sense of control as they are clearly outnumbered. What is a viable option? It's a peer-teacher program whereby there will be a reduction of the teacher-student ratio, and each and every student will be fully attended to. Madam Speaker, that is what we call equality. Madam Speaker, added to this, children are not being fully taught in the way that they are learning. Madam Speaker, we have to revamp our teaching strategies and provide better infrastructural facilities that would allow for a conducive space and study for these students. Madam Speaker, once students are engaged in meaningful work, there will be no room for violence to occur. Madam Speaker, my ministry also looks at social justice. Madam Speaker, is beating people really justice? How is it going to be just to hit a child who suffers from a disability or one who suffers from an anxiety disorder? Madam Speaker, in a study conducted by the U.S. Department of Education, it indicated that corporal punishment was used more frequently on poor children, minorities, children with disabilities, and boys. Madam Speaker, what the opposition is seemingly trying to convey is letting the stronger person take advantage of the weaker one. Madam Speaker, isn't justice supposed to be blind? But with the use of corporal punishment, it allows for dissemination of discrimination within our schooling system, and we cannot allow this to happen. Madam Speaker, drawing reference from article.
Honourable members, the speaking time for the Honourable Member for the Point Bon Air West has expired.
The speaking time for the Honourable Member be extended by a further 3 minutes.
Honourable members, the question is that the speaking time of the Honourable Member for the Point Bon Air West be extended by 3 minutes. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Member, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and honorable members. Madam Speaker, I was on the point of sustainable human development. Drawing reference from Article 19 of the UN Convention of the Rights of a Child, it declares that children and young people have the right to physical and personal integrity. The amended Children's Act of 2000 Part C, number 68, subsection 10 states, the right of a child is not to be treated with violence by a family member, a teacher, public officer, or by any other person. Madam Speaker, disciplinary...
The honourable member give way.
No, my time is spared right about now. I'm in my final 3 minutes. Madam Speaker, disciplining our students to physical punishment is therefore a violation of the basic human rights, as it contradicts with the rights of a child as enshrined in the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, it is ludicrous to foster segregation, instability, and inefficiency into our society when our mission is clearly for sustainable human development. With the reintroduction of corporal punishment, this is just a catalyst for social destruction. To conclude, Madam Speaker, inclusiveness, equity, social justice, and sustainable human development are some of the main driving forces behind development within our country. Madam Speaker, schools are microscomes of our society. And therefore, as the society gets more violent, it is a tendency for the school to breed violence as well. Madam Speaker, but we have to recognize that schools are also agents for change. And if we have a society paradigm, it is critical that we control school violence within our schooling system. Madam Speaker, we as the government, we care about our people, and we will deliver good governance that is empowering and not dehumanizing. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, apart from the Honourable Minister of National Diversity, I was appalled that the government showed little cohesion and little organization. Each member of the government was intent on refuting our arguments and saying that we were talking nonsense. However, none of them proposed alternative methods to combat the violence in our school system. Madam Speaker,
Will the member give way?
Yes, I will.
You stated that we did not suggest any other methods. That is because the methods are already in place.
Honourable Minister of Health, the members are in place. They are in place some 13 years now. But we still see an upsurge in crime and they have no effect on the discipline of our nation's youth. I'm sorry, I already gave way and my time is quite constrained. Additionally, Madam Speaker, the government was insistent on insisting that there is no parallel between the removal of corporal punishment and an upsurge in violence. However, they went on to say that the reinstatement of corporal punishment will cause an upsurge in crime. Where is the logic in that argument, Madam Speaker? Additionally, the Honourable Minister of Education, member for Faizabad, acknowledged my problem of crime and sat down and, she stood up and said change is needed. However, she proposed no sanctions. She didn't even say how the current sanctions could be improved, Madam Speaker. The Honourable Minister for Foreign Affairs, member for Arima, said that we have students home dilly-dallying and they will become drug pushers, etc. But with the government proposing suspensions and expulsions, aren't we giving students more time to dilly-dally at home? Yes?
Just to be clear, I did not say that there are students dilly-dallying. I said if corporal punishment is reintroduced into the schools, that they will be afraid to go to schools and then they will be dilly-dallying. Thank you.
The Honourable Member is making an assumption that children may be afraid to go to school. However, when we suspend a student or we expel a student, they are definitely at home dilly-dallying. Additionally, the Minister of Education, member for Faizabad, pointed out that she had one regional study done on the effect corporal punishment has on our students. However, every single member of the government quoted international studies done. Therefore, by her logic, all their arguments are flawed. No, I'm sorry. All their arguments are flawed, and coherently, they have flopped as a government in Parliament.
The member is misrepresenting facts presented by the government.
Overrule, member, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Minister of Tourism said that we cannot change the psychological construct and behavior of the individual. So how then are we to change the behavior of a child? A child born badly behaved will forever be badly behaved. Then none of your proposed sanctions will work, and we will forever be a nation falling victim to crime.
Will the member please give way?
No, I'm sorry, my time is horrendously constrained. Additionally, the Minister...
Honourable members, the speaking time of the Honourable Member Fuller Hockiter has expired.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the speaking time for the Honourable Member Fuller Hockiter be extended by further 3 minutes.
Honourable members, the question is that the speaking time of the Honourable Member Fuller Hockiter be extended by 3 minutes. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? Nay. I think the ayes have it. Member, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members of the House. As I was saying, the Minister of Health suggested that we wait for the proposed sanctions to mature and become proper. But we have waited 13 years. How many more children must be beaten, bullied, stabbed, or even killed before we consider implementing new sanctions in our school system? Madam Speaker, to quote the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Finance and Economy, he said, we don't need to go down there. But I ask you, high up where the government is, perhaps be above Mount Olympus, is the sanctions they have working? Is it that what they have implemented, I'm sorry, I can't give way, my time is constrained. Are the sanctions the government have in place working, Madam Speaker? And I agree with the Minister of Finance. And yes, we want our children to come forward and say, I admit what I have done wrong, and I am welcome to correction. But as has become cliched today in this most noble house, this is not an ideal society. We do not live in a utopic society where everybody will conform to measures put forward by the government. Additionally, the government seems to think we are here to debate why they are in government and we are in opposition. But I tell you, Madam Speaker, have they noted the results of the last by-election and the local government elections? Clearly.
Point of order.
Ready to see change in our government.
Point of order, 36-1 relevant.
Overrule, member, you may continue.
For the benefit of the government, I'll clarify why I raised that point. You seem to think that the entire population of Trinidad and Tobago, you represent them. No! Citizens voted for us.
Honourable member.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'll cut my presentation short because clearly I don't have enough time to continue. I'd just like to ask you to temper the decisions made here today. And I agree with the Minister of Health and the Minister of Public Utilities. We should vote not along party lines, but along our conscience and what we think is right for this great nation. Let us consider the merits of this debate and the solid arguments proposed by the opposition. Madam Speaker, corporal punishment will be implemented as a last resort to ensure violence is curbed in our schools. Madam Speaker, I beg to move.
Point of order, Standing Order 34-2, where a minister may conclude a debate where, as it is critical to the government, where discredit is being placed on the government.
Okay, in accordance to Standing Order 34-2, Honorable Member for Toku.
I thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, first of all, this is the chamber. It is the chamber, of course. And Madam Speaker, if I'm to quote what my fellow opposition said, Madam Speaker, he said, if you're born bad, you will live bad. Well, what I am thinking he's saying is that the nurseries in the hospital need corporal punishment. You are telling me, Madam Speaker, I am not here to bash anyone, because as the leaders of Trinidad and Tobago, I am here to conclude my arguments on the government side. Madam Speaker, at a time when violent crimes against children are on the rise in this country, Madam Speaker, the use of corporal punishment as a form of discipline is questionable. Research worldwide, Madam Speaker, has shown that this type of pervasive punishment in schools is disconcerting in a country that has high levels of violence, since it teaches children to resolve issues with violence or abuse.
Point of order 336, from a speech.
Honorable members, may I remind you once again, do not read from your speech, please. Honorable member, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, yet despite the ongoing global debate on the acceptability of corporal punishment, it remains a part of Caribbean culture and a practice of child rearing. It is being justified by citing biblical quotation. Madam Speaker, sadly, those who quote the scripture do so to terrorize the youth of Trinidad and Tobago.
Madam Speaker, point of order. The member is imputed in proper motives. That's Standing Order 36-5.
Honorable members, imputing improper motives is not allowed in this chamber. Honorable member, you may continue.
I thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, but I have long learned that Satan can quote scriptures very well.
Madam Speaker, point of order 36-4. The member is very offensive to me as a member of Sandy Grande.
Overrule, and I remember you may continue.
Madam Speaker, I withdraw that statement. Furthermore, I want to demonstrate how this motion is characteristic of the opposition irresponsibility and aptitude of sensationalism. Already, Madam Speaker, Trinidad and Tobago, according to UN statistics, has the highest rate of crimes and violence being committed against children. Madam Speaker, the opposition talked about the newspaper articles, but I am here to tell you that this will add to our negative international public image. Corporal punishment will add. But Madam Speaker, I am not surprised at all, as this is the true nature of the opposition. Madam Speaker, I said.
Honorable members, the question is, be it resolved that the government revisit the Children Act with a view to reintroducing corporal punishment to provide teachers with an additional method to counter the violence perpetrated by students. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any again? No. Madam Clerk.
Ms. Ramprasad? No. Mr. Savini?
No.
Ms. Thompson?
No.
Mr. Howard?
No.
Mr. Khan?
No.
Ms. Cordner?
No.
Mr. Lord?
No.
Mr. Hector?
No.
Ms. Joseph? No. Ms. Samuel?
No.
Mr. Gray?
Aye.
Mr. Badasi?
Nay.
Mr. Valentine?
No.
Mr. Hislop?
No.
Ms. Urbano?
No.
Mr. Kalicharan?
No.
Ms. Brewster?
No.
Ms. Benny?
No.
Ms. Mohammed?
No.
Mr. Thompson?
No.
Ms. Paul?
No.
Mr. Abel?
No.
Mr. Ruben?
No.
Ms. Sundar?
No.
Mr. Mariodo?
No.
Ms. Goodrich?
No.
Ms. Robertson?
No.
Ms. Amora?
No.
Ms. Manswell?
No.
Ms. Lord?
Yes.
Mr. Bechan?
Yes.
Mr. Jagat?
Yes.
Ms. Arthur?
Yes.
Ms. Cunningham?
Yes.
Mr. Ramutar?
Yes.
Mr. Anu?
Yes.
Mr. Kasher?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Ms. Rampal?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Langai?
Yes.
Ms. Beckles?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Sukhdeo?
Yes.
Ms. Peters?
Yes.
Mr. Adams?
Aye.
Madam Speaker, the result of the division is as follows: 19 for, 28 against, and no abstention.
Honorable members, the result of the division is 19 members voted for, 28 members voted against, and 0 abstentions. The motion has been negative. The Honorable Leader of the House.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that this House do now adjourn to a date to be fixed.
Before putting the question before the House, allow me to express appreciation on behalf of all members of this Youth Parliament to the Trinidad and Tobago branch of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association and the Parliament. In particular, the Planning Committee of the Office of the Parliament, who organized this 11th sitting of the National Youth Parliament. Today's debate focused on combating violence in schools, a topic that has held the attention of past governments and the government of today. The contributions made today by honorable members were comprehensive and sought to highlight the various issues surrounding the social phenomenon. The efficacy of events such as this is determined by the impact it will have after today rather than the display of the day. Therefore, we trust that the issues raised and information highlighted earlier will be reviewed and assessed by the relevant authorities and the relevant amendments made to the Children's Act or any legislation that would assist in alleviating the prevalence of violence and bullying in our schools. We wish to express our deepest gratitude to all officials who accepted our invitation and graced us with your presence. To our schools and institutions for selecting us, our family and relatives who exercised patience and assisted us in preparing for the debate, we say thank you. Special mention must also be made of the coordinating team of the Parliament, who contributed in varying measures to the successful execution of this event. Particular mention must be given to the staff of the Parliament Secretariat, who sacrificed their time to train us with respect to practice and procedure. The vivacious Miss Catherine Gordon, who coached us on dress, etiquette, and civility, and the effervescent Mrs. Diana Mahabi Wyatt, who took us through the paces with respect to debating skills, aspects of debating, and the standing orders. It was truly a distinguished privilege to have participated in this annual debate. You are kindly asked to remain seated after the adjournment for a brief afterward ceremony. Thank you. Honorable members, the question is that this House do now stand adjourned to a date to be fixed. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? This House now stands adjourned to a date to be fixed.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Levi. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for a very lively and entertaining and thought-provoking debate. I think you all deserve a round of applause. My name is Atiba Wilshire, and I'm the Corporate Communications Officer here at the Office of the Parliament. I must say that it has been my pleasure to be able to sit here, and even though I think the speaking time was a little too short for some of you all, yes, I know. It has been my pleasure to see the hopefully future parliamentarians of Trinidad and Tobago in the House.